All right, okay, I'm gonna call this Tolland Town Council meeting to order on September 14th, 2021 at 7:04 PM. Please rise for the pledge and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. That gets us to 4 proclamations and presentations. We have 2 requests for proclamations to bring forward to the town council tonight. The first one is a proclamation request for October as Cyberbullying Awareness Month. And the second is a proclamation request for Tolland Youth Football and cheerleading. For the first request, this was a request that was put in by Vice Chair Jones for October as Cyberbullying Awareness Month. And he and I have had a conversation where it was on the agenda, we're bringing it forward, but we want to just kind of discuss it a little bit. We're not going to move forward with the proclamation because it does not fit the policy that we have in place. In regard to the policy states that it needs to be either a presidential proclamation that we're recognizing or a recognition of a person, civic organization, what's with a person, civic organization?
An
event.
Yeah.
That has been in cognizance of the town. So there is a National Bullying Awareness Month, but it's not a presidential proclamation. So he and I are going to talk offline to try to figure out if there's something else that we can try to bring forward. But in the meantime, the library is going to be putting a display up to highlight bullying and a couple other aspects of the cyber aspect of it also. So I don't know, do you want to say anything on this one?
No, actually, I was just going to call out just a quick thank you. I think they might be not in the live audience, but the virtual audience. I know Deb gets raised some concerns, and I think that there was definitely some additional feedback that was appreciated there so that we can have more succinct and appropriate message regarding bullying. I know this was a request from a few residents, or one in particular that was looking to get some sort of town council related action to kind of make a statement about bullying due to some incidents as well as in public. So this was an attempt to respond to that. I think we're going to workshop it a little bit more succinct response and action from the council. But as Chair Minuccio did indicate, the library was more than eager to put up a display of relevant materials and information that the public can utilize for parents, adults, even children, through that zip line as well as in the school system. So the only thing I don't know is if we technically have to vote it down or if we're trying to table it. So I'll wait for if there's any other comments or questions from other counselors before making that motion.
And Lisa, I'm not sure if you would know. I know it's on here, but it just says it's a request. So would we have to vote it down at that point since it's on the agenda?
Yes, I mean, at this point, I think that would just be the easiest way to make sure. Tonight was really the discussion to determine whether it should be a proclamation or not.
Yeah.
So if you just take a vote that says we're not going to do this, at least it's documented as such.
We just don't have to take action.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this did bring up a very good point that Steve and I were talking about in regards to, the proclamation policy is really there to recognize individuals, organizations, and events, stuff like that. But then the question becomes, if something like this comes up, what is the path or avenue if the town council wants to recognize something or, talk about an issue or bring awareness to something. So I think that's a further conversation for us to have because, obviously, even if it's just X amount of states in the country or however, talking about bullying awareness is a good thing to talk about. So what's our path or avenue for that going forward? And also staying within the policy that we all unanimously voted on across the board, that the proper. So I guess we're not taking action then? Is that the thing?
Yeah, I don't know if that means we
That's
would
a-
have to have a motion to just not take action, or if it would just be
Well, you
considered.
wouldn't need a motion
Yeah.
to take action, but I think if your consensus is that you're not going forward with it, it won't be on the next agenda to be as a proclamation.
Okay,
Well, I guess my concern on that is it's specifically worded as a request. So I think, it would probably be better to vote on it, yes or no, because it is a formal request. And then we have, if it's approved, it goes to the next one to be finalized,
Officially,
right?
yeah,
So
presented.
the process is it comes forward as a request, the town council, and then we go from there. So since it is a request, I think it would probably be good to vote on it.
That's fine. I'm good with that. Council, if they could read, just a quick reminder, raise your hands, we can visualize it,
Yeah.
or if you're online, just the raise hand function. But I think Brenda might be wanting to speak.
You guys keep cutting out. There's someone moving around, something in the background. So there's been some conversations that have cut out. So just be cognizant if you're moving things, banging things, or even the cars going by, the windows in the background cuts out the audio. And we can't hear everything that you guys are talking about.
Enunciate more clearly.
All right, anybody else have any other questions on the plan with this? No? All right,
Steve Jones, I make a motion to deny the request under 4.1.
Kirsten, I'll second that.
any discussion? So the item is to deny it. So Lou,
I'm going to abstain. I'm sorry, I missed the discussion.
that's okay. Kurt,
Aye.
Aye.
John, sorry, Brenda,
No,
Steve,
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
I am an aye, so that's one abstain, one no, and what's that, 5 yeses. All right, the second one is a proclamation request for Tolland youth football in cheerleading. So this one came forward as a request to recognize Tolland youth football and cheerleading, and the wording that's on here right now is the wording that was requested from the resident, and I'm sorry, I am going to go to something that I have on my phone, because in regards to this, if this one moves forward, I would like to change the wording a little bit on the proclamation. And I just have it on my phone, what I would like to include. So I'm gonna open this up to anybody. Is there any feedback or questions on the Tolland Youth Football and Cheerleading Proclamation? This one does fit because it is an organization within town that is beneficial to the town. So does anybody have any questions or anything on this one? Okay.
yeah, I'm sorry, I can't get my hand raised.
Okay, Brenda?
Thanks. Reading through this and thinking about all the different, programs that we have for youth sports, club sports, etc. In maybe even adults. I think we have some adult club sports, or at least we used to. I would love it if we could have more specifics. For example, like, how many teams, how many years, that kind of information, because then anybody could walk up and say, hey, this group is great, and let's create a proclamation for them. I think that the community really wants to find out for any of these clubs, what it is that they specifically offer the town. It's a great opportunity to educate Tolland on what we have to offer, both our youth and any other sports. Any sporting program obviously is good for physical health. And my daughter used to be a cheerleader. For those of you who knows cheerleading, she was a flyer, gave me a heart attack all the time watching her do that. So we've been part of this organization before when she was of the age, but and not just for this one, but for any youth program. And I know we received some emails about some other sporting groups, and to take a look at, I think it was even requested that we recognize all of them. You know, I really want to celebrate what the clubs bring to Tolland and get the opportunity to educate our entire community. So, and it says, you know, over 50 years. How many years? Is it like 55 years? Can we do like an anniversary recognition for this club or other clubs? You know, if we're going to do the proclamations, let's just not do them quickly. Let's do our research and let's really celebrate what everybody brings to our community. And that's my observation.
Funny you mentioned that, Brenda, because that's pretty much the changes that I wanted to make to the proclamation. The only thing that I don't have is the absolute date that it was founded. It was in the 1960s, but I don't have the exact date. I have asked for that. But the things that I would like to have added to this language is that the town of Tolland was a founding town of the Northern Connecticut Football League in 1987. The organization represents 120 plus families a year and is made up of 150 plus athletes. They participate in local food drives, winter hat and glove drives for the needy. They participated in the spring fling when it was allowed. Also in Tolland Cleanup Day, just to name a few of the endeavors. And their motto is family, school, football, and cheer. So I would like to change the wording in here to encompass the founding town of the Northern Connecticut Football League in 1987, and that they represent 120 families, 150 plus athletes. They do multiple community service projects that benefit our town and residents. And Lisa, I can send all this to you. I have it. And I would definitely like to mention their motto, because I think you know, it's very important to them. It's what they coach and what they live by. So I think family, school, football, and cheer in that order is something that I think we would want to mention.
I'd love to see the ages too, you know, that it's covered. You know, this way, when someone sees this Tolland Youth Football and cheerleading, and for any other youth sports club or adult club, you know, to be able to have the ages, to see the teams, etc. I think it just adds so much more and allows us to find out what, you know, what is being offered. It might help recruit for any sport. And obviously we want the youth in our community to be healthy. But I you know, that's my thing. I'd love to see this all written out too, prior to an approval, just like anytime I'm one of those people that needs to see things in writing. So I would appreciate that.
Okay, anybody else have anything that they, oh, sorry, Steve, sorry.
Just,
That
I'm
way.
no worries, I figured to make the way back around. I'm okay with the amended changes that have been presented by multiple counselors. One question I had is, if we go forward with the request, are we doing a formal presentation with any leadership in person, or is this being presented remotely? I'm just curious how we would proceed with that. It's going to be an in-person presentation with our usual, like in the past, photographs or anything like that, or would it be more digital posting? Or I'm just curious if that was any preference from the requester, if they required an in-person presentation or if they wanted it digitally presented.
So the requester did ask for a presentation,
Okay.
but I also reached out to the head of Tolland Youth Football to ask about doing a presentation too. So I am waiting to hear back on when they would like to do it. The original request came in with the 45-day grace period and everything else. It's on our agenda, so it can be done in time for that, which is good. Because that was another thing that we wanted to mention during this, is that the proclamation policy calls for people to submit the proclamations 3 months ahead of time for a recognition date, and the absolute minimum is 45 days. So the town has time to prepare it and everything else. And there has been an influx of asks, and that all takes time from the town staff to go ahead and do, and also do the research on and put the wording together and everything else. So we have to be cognizant that when people request it, they understand if you're requesting something and it's for the next council meeting, it's not gonna happen. We have to be cognizant of timeline. So they did request a formal presentation of this, but as I
Okay.
said, I would like to make the formal presentation to the actual football club.
Mhm.
So when I hear back from Mr. Wells on that, I can let everybody know. And if there's a formal presentation, everybody can be there.
Okay,
We'll take care of that. Anything else?
no, I'm good.
Anybody else? All right, so,
Let's just say I was making a motion.
go ahead.
Seeing no other conversation, I would make a motion that we approve the proclamation request as amended under item 4.2.
So we can go ahead and approve it, and then we'll have the final language. We can still discuss the final language. This is just approval to move it forward, not the actual, so,
Lulu will second it.
okay, any other discussion?
I think Brenda's trying to say
I'm-
something.
I'm confused. We're approving to move for, are we going to do another approval once we get the language?
We do the first one, and then we get the final language in the second meeting. That's what we've done in the past, is there's a request. We're approving the request, that the town council approves of the request, and then we get the final language the second time. As far as that's what we've done in the past, Lisa, are you? Yeah. So we'll have a proclamation with any changes that we've noted in this meeting in the next meeting.
And we have to approve that too.
No, I think,
I'm not gonna vote on something that I don't see the final language for.
We just.
That's all.
We have a final proclamation. If there's any final changes, we can make that during the meeting.
yeah,
And rather than present it live there, it could be printed out and presented at a future date.
right.
But it would be published in the packet, just so that people are aware of what the language is, and they can provide input on any final adjustments. So I think this would just be a motion to get the request going forward with some suggested language from counselors to help build up what was initially provided by the resident that made the request.
Right, so this is the approval to move it forward.
Right,
So-
and my question still stands. When the final language is created, are we going to approve that or not?
Yes, we would have it. We'll have it in front of us. If there's any changes anybody wants to make, then we would have to make those changes before we approved it going forward.
Yeah.
It's a request. We're going forward with the request. We'll see the final language.
Okay, I'm still not gonna vote until I see the final language, so that's it. Thanks.
Lou,
Aye.
Kurt,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Brenda,
Abstain.
Steve,
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
I'm an aye, so you got that, Lisa. Okay. All right, Lisa, I will send you the language that I have, and I will ask if I can get a more definitive date on the established date, and if we can get the ages and number of teams to add to the language.
Send me everything that you have, and once you have that information, then we'll get at least the final language in place. We'll get it on the next agenda
Yep.
for discussion to make sure it's finalized, and then we'll determine the date for presentation.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I
Okay.
appreciate that. All right, that gets us to number 5, public holy moly, public petitions, communications, and public participation on any subject within the jurisdiction of the town council. If you are online, you can raise your hand on a device. If you are on the phone, it is *9 to raise your hand, *9, right? *9 to raise your hand. If you are in person, which nobody is, please state your name and address for the record when you are called on.
There's 2 hands raised.
And let's see.
With a 2-minute limit.
And it's a 2-minute limit, yes. Reenie was first, right? Yes, Reenie Peace.
Rini Besaw, 230 Grant Hill Road. I see that you have on the agenda the turf field, which I know we have requested a meeting with the town council around. So I would request that you not make any final decisions until that discussion can be had. I went through some of the materials that you have, and I see you have some information that we did not have, but I would appreciate, again, the town council holding off on any final decisions until we can have a discussion, because I believe the Board of Ed was the one who kind of raised their hand and said, hey, we need to figure this out, what's going to happen. And I think it should be a joint decision because it is a field that the Board of Ed uses a lot. The town also uses it, but you know, it is an important asset to the community, and I would like it to not be just a unilateral decision by the town council.
Thank you. Tonight is just it's an opportunity for the town council to get up to date on the history, and we will be scheduling a joint meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sophia Johnson? You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to thank the town council for having the September 11th observance for the community. I understand that in previous years, the fire department would gather together, and for me, you know, moving, I say it a lot, but it's Sophia Johnson, 48 Crystal Lake Road. Sorry. I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful. The playing of taps was the most moving that I've ever heard. I understand that Bill might have information with regard to the gentleman that played taps. It was the most moving I've heard in my life. And there was a fellow Tollander that saw me standing alone, and they came by to hold hands with me. And it was just a really somber, wonderful community event to recognize how the country was hurt and the country was strengthened at the same time. And I would like to thank you for your words and your message, Lou, for the message of strength that we need to hold on to that, as well as recognizing the despair. And I'm just grateful that we had one in Tolland, so I didn't have to travel all the way back to New York to participate. So again, thank you. And I hope that we can continue this tradition of doing this observance as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. I'm not seeing any other public at the time. Do you? Is there anyone else? Nope. All right. That takes care of everybody. Thank you very much. Gets us to number 6, public hearing items. We have none. Is reports of boards and commissions responsible to the council. Brenda.
Hello. So first, state tourism. The CT visit webpage has now changed to the fall campaign. So they've updated their pictures to be all fall oriented, and the tourism to be fall oriented. There's a few things that we have to update on the Tolland side that I'll get taken care of. You know, a couple businesses need to be removed, a couple more should be added. The name of the campaign is Find Fall Faster. So that was exciting, because what we've talked about in the tourism industry is that Connecticut has everything that the rest of New England has. So you really don't have to go far in order to be able to find fall activities around here. So I spoke with 4 people about the tourism role that is up, and that, you know, we're going to be considering, you know, because it's a 3-year role. And I haven't heard that any of those 4 have applied, but it gave them all sorts of background about what the role does. It was exciting to see that many people interested. And our Tolland tourism page, I've currently invited over 700 more people to the page. So I'm pretty excited to see that page grow. It's great that we'll be able to get some fall pictures, and we'll continue to share events. It is Small Business Week, so I just found that out today. So I'll be starting to share different small businesses this week on that page to help promote them in the region. Sustainable CT, we don't have an update. And I wanted to give a quick update on the census. I know that committee hasn't been meeting, but they recently released the 2020 census numbers for towns that have over 5,000 residents. So in April 1st of 2010, Tolland had 15,056 residents. Again, that's in 2010. On April 1st, 2020, our count was 14,536. That's down a little bit, but if you take a look around in your neighborhoods, you've probably seen a lot of new families moving in because of the situations that we're in. To let you know about our surrounding towns, Vernon went from 29,179 up to 30,215. Coventry went from 12,435 down to 12,235. Wellington went from 6,041 down to 5,556. And Ellington went up from 15,602 to 16,426. So there is just like little changes and adjustments. And the reason why I bring up the numbers is because Connecticut is starting to have discussions about the mapping of the districts, the voting districts. So that started recently, and you'll be continually seeing stuff from the state about that. So those three are what I have.
Thank you, Brenda. Okay, that gets us to 7B, which is reports of town council liaisons. I'm gonna start with Bill this time.
On the second, oh, thank you.
You're very welcome.
On the second, we had a permanent celebration committee meeting. And the initial talking was about the scarecrow contest and the logistics surrounding that. And as you've all seen, we've had some email correspondence with some requests that they are currently trying to work through as it pertains to access, disability access, and trying to work through those things. I did see emails back and forth, as you all did. So there's communication going, and it looks like they're going to be able to work some things out. They reviewed the calendar and set the date of the tree lighting on the 4th, December 4th. They also looked at the budget, and they're currently doing well with their budget. Budget is $6,000, and looked at some of the expenses that they have with the upcoming events. They also discussed their meetings going forward and if they would be hybrid or in person, and they all decided that they would continue to meet in person for the time being. One of the more time-consuming discussions was on the vacancy that they have in the committee, and I believe we're going to talk more about that later. But they did have they committed a significant amount of time discussing that. So it was nice to see that they didn't take it lightly, and they discussed that. And they also started to look at the 2022 parade, and they are beginning to contact participants to see who they have and if they need to engage other people to participate in that. And it was a good meeting. It was my first meeting with them, and it was a good meeting. I was happy to see that they were looking to increase the events that bring the town together, which is definitely something that we all need.
Agree. We had Mary Pat and I had talked last year, 2 years ago actually, about trying to bring a food truck in conjunction with the scarecrow contest. The scarecrow contest. We wanted to do a trick or treating and a food truck kind of event. So I know that got put off for COVID. So I'm hoping she still is looking at that and has the momentum to see if that's something that the town can do, using the town green for that. I think that would be really cool. That's all you have?
That was the only meeting I had. Yeah.
Awesome. Steve?
All right, on September 9th, the Conservation Commission met. I was unable to make it, but I'll just give a quick summary. They discussed the Hatch and Donkeyville properties. Hatch is moving forward. Donkeyville is kind of on hold at this point. There's no closing date on that. They selected their finalists for the photo contest and poetry contest. Those winners will be invited to the October meeting. Speaking of October, on the 30th will be the grand opening for the Wanted event. They had one a couple weeks ago, and they actually just yesterday had another sneak peek event in association with the AARP funds they received. You know, they've been working to promote some of those funds that they received, as well as the funds from the public through the Patronicity fundraiser. And their next meeting is the sidewalk on the 23rd at the King property. After that, last night, the Public Library Foundation met. They renewed their relationship with Worcester Cortell. They provided an update. They've had a phenomenal year with investments. I think they're up about 21% year over year and roughly about 8 to 9% over, I think, the past 10 years. They did send a letter, and I believe most counselors received it, or at least the leadership did, setting a meeting for their presentation, their annual presentation on the 12th, and a request to have 3 of their members be reappointed to terms ending in 2023. The library director did note that there will be an event in October regarding racism. They're finalizing some of the details, but that was an event that I believe funding from the budget was provided by the council to the library. So they've informed the foundation of that. And they will be at the Celebrate Tolland event doing a raffle for a Nook and hopefully getting some signups and some information about the Tolland oral history. They're actively seeking participants and people that have a good in-depth knowledge of Tolland history and working with the Historical Society about getting some documentation. Just as a quick aside, one interesting thing is they talk about a lot of World War II history, and there used to actually be spotters that would meet over near where St. Matthews is to look out for planes, any potential enemy aircrafts over Tolland. So there is some interesting history that they're hoping to build up into a final performance in a future date regarding the town's history through the foundation's funding. So, and that is it for me.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. One other item is that they did vote to be fully remote and utilize their Zoom account through the foundation. I know that, I think they relayed that to Lisa so that we have that tally of what groups and organizations are hybrid, in person, or Zoom. So they voted to be entirely remote for the time being.
Perfect. Thank you very much. One person, Brenda.
Sorry about that. I think the batteries are dying in my mouse. So planning and zoning met last night. They had a discussion about what kind of format they wanted to do for the public hearing that's coming up in 2 weeks. They expect it to be very well attended. They decided on a hybrid meeting and they tested out the capabilities of Zoom to find the best way to implement that. So I thought that was very proactive of them. Let's see, what else did they have here? Oh, they also had a resident come forward and discuss the possibility of, they have some interest in opening a restaurant near the Tolland Green. So that resident was invited back to have a discussion with Planning and Zoning Commission, an informal discussion, the first meeting in October. Let's see, the Blight Committee met and they do in-person meetings. They had a discussion and they decided they want to keep their meetings in person. The reason why is many of the situations that they talk about could be discussing personal hardship, illness, family emergencies, financial impacts to families, things like that. So they thought that having anything on Zoom or hybrid would create a recording and a permanent record that may not be what we really want to do in these kinds of situations. Yes, we do want to record in minutes what we discussed and, you know, if the situation has been resolved. But we want to be cognizant that sometimes when we're discussing blight, this could be a very challenging, you know, or personal stories that are being shared. So when they were talking about that, we also mentioned that at some point the town council was going to be talking about, you know, this was prior to the pandemic, remote participation policy. And they wanted to ensure that they can continue to meet and allow people to phone in on their commission so that they don't have to worry again about sharing personal information or other information that might be sensitive in nature. So I wanted to pass that along. They did discuss a couple blight properties. Jim gave us a very good understanding of how he approaches these. He's an excellent asset for this town. We're very lucky to have him. He works so well with the community to help in these situations and alleviate blight issues. You know, I'm always very impressed with how he handles this. So kudos to him.
Brenda, before you move on.
Yes.
Is there any way, I just want to clarify, you said they had a little concern or questions around the
Yes.
remote meeting. You had mentioned that they want to meet in person, but you said they want to ensure they can continue to meet in person, but allow people to phone in?
Yes, phone in on a phone in case someone is one of the people on the blight committee cannot meet and they need to meet a quorum. They want to ensure that that member can still phone in, call, because we did have a member do that last meeting. And they've been doing that regularly. They want to ensure that that person or persons can still phone in to be able to hold the meeting, be able to resolve the blight issue in a timely fashion, but still protect the privacy of the residents. If we require them to do a Zoom, like a hybrid for someone who's not there, then that means the meeting would get recorded. And all the discussion with all the minute details would end up being recorded and be out there for the public to see. And that, you know, while these meetings are public and people can show up, we felt that it was better to be able to have some sort of privacy, you know, as much as we can allow it. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that helps. I think that we were looking at, when we were looking at the remote policy, back then, the option was to be able to phone in and
Right.
still, okay, I understand what you're saying now.
Right. But, you know, now that we've had the pandemic and now we have the option of Zoom, we don't know if Zoom is going to always be available. And we want to ensure that, you know, we would not get rid of the phone option for remote participation and only require Zoom, or get rid of the phone option. I mean, because town councils change. We want to make sure that that phone option, being able to phone in and not having to record the meeting, only being able to take notes instead of a recording, would be an option that's available.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yep. So let's see if I covered everything. Oh, and the Historic Commission is meeting tomorrow night. They are going to be doing a remote meeting. So the agenda is up online. They're taking a look at an application for someone to pave a driveway and to install a fence. So, yeah, and they're taking a look at some zoning regulations. And that will be tomorrow at 7.
Perfect. Okay, all right, thank you very much. John?
WPCA did not meet, so nothing to report this week.
Thank you. Kurt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple things. On September 1st, we had an Economic Development Committee meeting. Tammy was there as a representative of the state to discuss a possible legislation that would affect people with disabilities and businesses or possible potential employers. So that was a great conversation. They did ask that I bring back to the council that at some point they would like to have a meeting with the town council to kind of go over goals that the council would like to see in terms of economic development and to work with them. This probably at this point be something that would happen after the election, but just something to put in the notes for maybe end of this year, early next year, to kind of give the Economic Development Committee some guidance, or not guidance, but some directive or what the town council is interested in seeing. Second meeting, we had a Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting last night. Kind of some discussion over how the summer events went, and talked about the upcoming future events, including basketball. So signups are apparently open for that. And we also discussed the turf field, which we'll be discussing tonight. So besides that, and, oh wait, they did talk about possibly where to put pickleball courts, so that's that for them.
Perfect. Lou?
Thank you, Madam Chair, that the Birch Grove Building Committee did meet last week, that we did discuss some additional change orders, that going into the meeting, there's actually another special meeting tonight where they're discussing a few other issues. But as far as, which I'm not going to be at, but as far as the last week, the way that things stood at the beginning of the meeting is that there was an owner's contingency balance of $29,070.38. And construction design contingency balance of $10,488.46. We discussed several different change orders, which encompassed putting on a running track striping for the track that circles the area that there was going to be striping that we would run through the middle so that it would that you would have like a normal track that was that we discussed that. There was also weed seal to that. There was a discussion about putting it underneath the fence that surrounds the soccer fields and the track. That there was a mechanical loading dock leveler that we had discussed, as well as a gate, a double gate, which would replace the existing gate over by where the portables were. That based upon discussions and significant concern that myself and other members had regarding the remaining contingency fund, where if we approved all of the purchases that were being proposed, it would have left us with $800. So we decided to table several different things. We did vote on the issues regarding the, there was also a catch basin which we needed to address, which was, if anyone's been out there lately, that there's where the parking lot is and there's a hill that leads down to where a playground area was, that it was basically an indoor pool or an outdoor pool after some of the rains. So there was a proposal for a catch basin that that we did approve the catch basin as well as the loading dock leveler, and that the fence was also approved, the double gate. That the other matters were all tabled until this week, just to see where things stand and see if there was any other unforeseen contingencies that would that we needed to take into account. That, as everyone knows, that this Saturday is the grand opening, the open house that we have for Birch Grove. That it is going to be this Saturday over at the school from 10 o'clock until 1 o'clock, and that we hope to see everybody there.
Thank you very much. I did not have any meetings in the last 2 weeks. So thank you all for the updates. I appreciate it. That gets us to new business. 8.1, consideration of a resolution to approve the firm of Strategic Government Resources, or SGR, to conduct the town manager recruitment process and authorizing the Director of Administrative Services to enter into an agreement with SGR in the absence of the town manager. No.
Okay.
Lisa? Yeah, that was weird. Is everybody on mute? Was that like, it came out of that?
Yeah, sound like a radio.
Yeah.
Sir.
Just hacking the owl.
That's not funny.
So we have, this evening, we have Mike Wilkinson with us, who's going to present this agenda item.
Okay, Mike? take it away.
Thank you. So as you know, previously the council asked me to look into the last company that we hired to do the recruitment back in 18 and 19 to see where they were. Again, they did the recruitment back then. There was a clause in their contract if within 2 years or within 18 months, they could possibly do it for free if the town manager left. The town manager left a little over that, so we would have to do another fee for this recruitment. But they were able to reduce their fee by several $1,000s to $21,900. And again, we'd be using the similar staff from the company. And also we obviously have a lot of built-in equity as far as things we did with this company, as far as things we prepared. So we could hit the ground running with them if the council decided to go in this route. So this just approves hiring them if that's what you see to do. If you don't want to do that, then there's other options, including doing a full RFP for consultants, or any other ideas you have about what you'd want to do with the recruitment of the town manager. So that's what you have before you. If there's any questions about the SGR or anything about this approval, I can answer those for you.
Okay, perfect. So at this time, does anybody have any questions regarding the process or the firm going forward from the town manager recruitment perspective? Lou?
Yeah, so just some of the issues that I'd like to know is, by going with this, if we were going to consider this outside group, that they have basically all the ability to conduct a full search inherent within that one organization.
Yeah, they, again, they're a soup to nuts operation, so they'll do everything from meeting with the council beforehand to get an idea of what the council wants to do. They'll prepare the information and documents and any type of brochures that need to go out about the position in the town, which we've already prepared the first time. They'll do the full recruitment and advertise on a national level. They'll triage the applicants they get back. They will meet multiple times with the council at certain steps along the way. They'll do semifinalists, finalists. Once the council chooses a candidate, they'll also vet the candidates completely with background checks. They'll also negotiate the contract and prepare a draft contract for the council, obviously subject to our review and by our attorneys. But so it's a soup to nuts, and obviously whatever public input the council wants, they'll work to set that up. Public meetings with employees or residents in public forums, they'll set that up, and we did that last time and it was successful. So they will do all that within the scope of what this is. The only extra cost would be if there's any extra cost for flying in finalists or travel costs like that, which we usually reimburse to the finalists directly, and then any other expenses that aren't, covered directly under the fee. But this is, most of it would be covered under this fee.
Okay. And then they also, so they're also subject to confidentiality agreements as far as if for the background checks, if they're conducting, that there's confidentiality agreements that they have as well, like about not sharing information, or if there's any issues regarding, any information they may come across while they're doing their canvas, they already have those in place, as well as liability insurance, as well as anything, anything else. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. They would have to adhere to any either federal, state, or local laws as far as confidentiality and things like that. And obviously they have insurance and that would cover them and the town. Also, we have insurance. So yes.
Okay. And then and then you brought up a good point as far as the federal and state statutes. They have like either in-house or legal counsel available to advise them, and they're as far as any restrictions or anything else along those lines.
Oh, yeah. Again, they're a national firm, so they do this not just in Connecticut, but they do it in multiple states. So yeah, that's something they're obviously aware about and have to be cognizant of and follow.
Okay. And then one last question I have is that as far as for everything else that's involved, say if we decided to go with either a town committee or that we had town residents go through similarly like we did with Steve Warbner the last time. Is there, how much would it cost for us if we wanted to do separate groups that would have to do the background investigation and the contract review through legal and everything else? Do you have any type of estimates or comparison as far as the amount that you have listed here is about 21,000? Would that be about the same, more, less? Just
Yeah, I don't have a comparable, Luke, because I wasn't here when we did the original with the town panel of residents. But as far as staff time and also costs of farming stuff out, it's certainly going to be in the ballpark of what we're spending, but I don't really have an idea if it's a little bit less, a little bit more, a lot less. Because I wasn't around and I haven't been involved with that in any other town, so I can't speak to specific cost comparisons because they are different processes. So.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, that's all I have at this point.
You're welcome. Kurt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, just a quick question. How was this, I mean, obviously we used it last time, but how was this firm selected the last time?
So we did an RFP, or a request for proposal or qualification. So that was sent out. I think we got multiple companies back, so that those companies were reviewed by the town council as far as what their program was. They came in and met with the council. They obviously had proposals. They were reviewed and vetted. And then based on the responses, the council selected SGR as the candidate, or as the company to do the recruitment in 2018-19. So, which is, the council made that decision because it's obviously their purview to select the new town manager. So that was the process. It was a full RFP. So we got responses, whoever wanted to respond as far as companies who do this type of work. And then they were vetted and chosen by the council.
Thank you.
Brenda?
I thank you. So a couple observations. We've not only chosen the town manager, Steve Warpner, this way through a panel of residents. We've also chosen principals in our schools this way too. And I think we had some residents involved in the superintendent search. Maybe I can get some clarification on that because I wasn't paying attention at the time. Sorry, Dr. Willett. But I prefer going the route of the residents. They know the town better. Hi, Dr. Willett. We do have residents in this town who are recruiters, who are upper level managements who recruit or are in the hiring process. We have an expert in Mike, you here to help our panel, if we go the route of the panel, follow all the guidelines and what they're supposed to do. We were very successful before in a number of different ways of having a panel of residents. Besides recruiting, we've also had a panel of residents do the building committee for Birch Grove and the charter. So we have experts in our community who do an awesome job. And thank you for all the volunteers who do this. So my preference is to go with the panel of residents. My second preference is to not just go with SGR, but to do a search for a consultant. It took 2 searches in order for this consultant to find candidates for us. I wasn't entirely pleased with the process. And it might have just been the pool of candidates, but I would much rather have the opportunity to check and see who else is out there and what other products they might be able to offer us for finding town managers. So that's where I stand on this and my observations. Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure that we're addressing this completely. Mike, we did get some email regarding some residents that wanted to use the community panel for this process. And I know you weren't here when Mr. Warbner was hired, but can you talk about what the process would look like if it was a community panel, and what would the workload for that panel look like if we were to go in that direction?
Well, I guess the first question I would say that would really be up to the council about how you'd want to set up the panel. that would be really under your purview, how many people would be on it and et cetera. But once that's created, I mean, it would be very much like Brenda mentioned. I mean, the Birch Grove, you know, they meet very often. It would be intensive. There'd be a lot of information going out and coming in. There'd be a lot of reviewing of information. There'd also have to be the one thing I'm not, since again, as you mentioned, I wasn't around when they did the one back in 2004 and 5. There's a question about how involved the council would want to be in it, because they're the ultimate decider of who is selected the town manager. So that's something the council would have to decide also. So the makeup and setup is really up to the council, but there would be a lot of work for the members, and I think by extension, some or all of the council members would also be doing some extra work, obviously, because there's a lot obviously involved with the recruitment at this level and making sure you get everything done right. So it would be intensive, but I agree with Brenda. There's a lot of great people in Tolland, but it will definitely be intensive, John.
And then as a follow-up, if we were to go in that direction, this is probably a question for the town attorney, but what would the town be looking at as far as liability goes in case, you know, if something arises and there may not be any lawyers on the committee, so what would the town be facing for any liability issues if something were to come up that some process wasn't followed properly? That's the thing that really worries me about a community panel would be liability. If something was done improperly and a candidate thought that a committee mistreated them and they decided to pursue litigation against the town, that's what really concerns me about that process. So I don't know if you would know anything about that.
Well, I guess I would just say in general that would definitely be a concern up front, and we would definitely have to address it with our attorneys, so that at every stage we try to deal with that and what the possibilities could be for a problem. So is obviously is another added, you know, concern. So yeah, again, whenever you have people, you know, doing things like a recruitment, whether it's internally here for the town or with a panel, that is a concern. So you'd have to do it step by step and rigorously follow what you need to do with whatever laws or so it is a concern. We'd have to look at that at every stage to avoid that, definitely.
Okay, and then so if we used a recruiter, SGR, for example, the way I'm looking at this and the way I'm understanding this is they would be sort of a firewall between any potential litigation and the town. Does that sound correct to you? Or a buffer between the town and any potential litigation, or?
Well, as you may know, John, anyone can sue anyone if they want to. So it's an expertise that they have. And I'm not saying that candidates who are on a panel wouldn't have that expertise, but they are a company, so they do have obviously protection set in, and they do this often, so they know what to look for. But you know, ultimately, the town is also involved. So if there is some issue that the town could be brought in, I wouldn't use your word firewall, but you know, it's a different setup where you have structure and a company that does this on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, so they know what to look for and what the pitfalls to look out for, so that they and by extension us, the town, don't fall into those pitfalls.
Very good, thank you.
Anybody, Bill?
Thank you. One question, is it for hiring for a position like this, CEO level positions, whether it's for a town or for a company, is it standard operating procedure to use a search firm?
I would say in my experience, for most it is. Yes, I mean, you know, I think there's an expertise and there's a niche that has grown in the last 20, 30 years for doing that. So I would say yes. The company SGR, I mean, they do recruitments. I think they're doing a police chief in Connecticut, in the central Connecticut somewhere right now. So usually high levels, they do, it is very common, William.
Thank you.
Anybody else before I go back to Brenda?
You call Brenda first.
All right, Brenda?
Hi, yes, thank you. When we create this, if we go the route of a panel of residents, when we create this panel, we can ensure that we have people who are in HR, who know hiring practices. We can make sure we have recruiters or consultants in there. So we may be able to find all of the talent we need right here in Tolland. That know these roles. I am a recruiter. I'm familiar with many of the practices. I'm familiar with what questions I can ask and not ask during interviews. I am absolutely sure that we can find residents who are just as familiar with those and with those rules and laws. And if they have any questions, they have the town attorney and Mike to go to ask questions of. It's just because, it's going to be difficult, but it's worth doing, and it's worth doing the right way. And again, I believe that finding the experts within Tolland is going to help us get candidates that the panel knows would fit in Tolland because they know Tolland better. Also creating the pamphlets in the advertising and stuff. If you get recruiters, that's what we do. We can create things like that. We have a POCD to go by. We have a town webpage that has great information, historical information about the town. This is where SGR gathered all the information anyway. It's already there. It's already been provided. So we know what needs to be gathered in order to put together a brochure, pamphlet, booklet, whatever you want to call it, to attract town managers to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Lou?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few comments is, one was that similarities were drawn between the search group that, if we brought in a community search group and other organizations that have done this, similar to the Birch Grove Building Committee and other things like that. With the Birch Grove Building Committee, being a member of that, I can tell you that we heavily rely upon the consultants that the state hired in relation to this case. I mean, in relation to that building, that they are the ones that come in and that they actually work on the contract. They present their recommendations to the board. They are vitally involved. They are our go-between between the state and the construction company. So it's not like it's solely the citizens that are working on it. We have the final approval authority on it, but that it's the CAP, it's the construction company, that you have other consultants. So you have a number of outside groups that are already covered underneath our agreement with the state. So I think that it's something where it's sort of a false similarity to say that, oh, that we already have a successful citizens group. We do, but we relied heavily upon the consultants and the people hired by the state to work on this contract. And I think that the other thing is that we're regularly talking about additional burdens on the staff and concerns about, are we overburdening the town staff on doing certain things? If we had a citizens committee, that we would also be relying, I'm certain, heavily upon the town staff to pick up the additional slack, where we would have to rely upon them to do certain things for us. That there would be other things. We'd also be employing, I can tell you pretty heavily, the town attorney on almost every issue. So there's that we would have to hire a private firm to do a background check. We'd have to do other things all the way along, where we'd be doing it piecemeal rather than one coherent package. And that's my main concern, beyond the liability issue, which is also always another issue where that having had, been involved in hiring processes, having been involved in promotion processes, that the law is constantly changing unless you're up on it completely all the time, that there's a little nuance, a little thing, a comma instead of a period could change the outlook on something completely. And that's something that I think that we need more than just expertise. We need somebody that is consistently in this and that also provides the town a single package deal that could handle this all at once. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. So my only feedback on this, Mike, is I'm assuming that if we go forward with SGR, that we have the opportunity to provide feedback from the 3 counselors that were here last time for things we liked or didn't like, to perhaps have them change in their practice going forward. Is that a fair assumption?
Are you asking, would we talk to the counselors that were on the board when they were selected to find out what worked and didn't work?
Well, I think that, you know, John, myself, and Brenda, we might have some feedback on ways that they did the process or ways that they gave us information or something like that, that we'd like to maybe see differently. And
Oh, okay, you're talking about during the recruitment, you're saying, yeah. Oh, yeah, I think, you know, I certainly have some ideas, and I think there, you know, nothing's perfect in this world, and there's definitely things that if we do it again with SGR or with anyone, there's things I would learn from, and I think the council members probably have things too. So that would be a good input, and obviously SGR is very receptive to what the council wants to do. So I think that would definitely be something that we could take advantage of and help improve the process.
okay, and then my last thing would be, in respect to the differing opinions, I would definitely like to see a rigorous conversation with SGR around public input for the process, at what phases we could do it, where I know when we talked about it last time, there was a lot of concern because we get very confidential information from them, and we meet in executive session to go over a lot of this stuff. And I know that there's limits to when we can have the public involved, when we wouldn't, but I would definitely be looking for something possibly a little more robust than they did last time in terms of public participation. And I'm not quite sure where that would fall. So if we go forward with them, I would definitely like to make sure that they know that they can start brainstorming on ways that we can try to have more public input into the process as we go, and at which times it would be appropriate to do that. So that's all my feedback at this point. In fact, I thought it would be best to go to you with that.
Yep, no, I think the council is going to be driving the train, so I think SGR would want to hear that, and they'd want to try to, you know, figure out what they can do. If that's one focus that we want to do this time differently, then I'm sure they could come up with some ideas and add in more of that. You know, that sounds very reasonable and prudent.
Okay. All right. Is there any other discussion? Steve?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to first recognize, Mike, you did put a lot of work into working with SGR and kind of keeping leadership apprised of all the updates. So I just wanted to give you that kudos, that it's definitely, as an outsider to SGR when they first came in, other than the tail end when the finalists were being selected, I kind of started getting involved as a resident. I appreciate all your updates, and I also appreciate the dialogue from all the counselors, pros and cons. At this point, my lean would be to rather go for the community panel and perhaps give some more time to that. I think our interim town manager, Lisa Hancock, has done a very good job. And I think we can afford the extra months to build in a community panel to do that search. Just sort of as a personal aside, I remember last year when the hurricane or tropical storm Isaias hit, I had heard some chatter that people were criticizing me as a counselor because they thought I was Steve Wagner, and Steve Wagner was still the manager. And so to me, that kind of sends a signal that there's a little bit disconnect between the community and who our town paid leadership is. And I think this is a really great opportunity to get the community more involved in better understanding how our town government works and how our, you know, paid leadership and our elected leadership kind of have an interplay. So that's my main driver of going for a community panel over SGR. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome. Okay. Do you want to?
Yes, I will.
All right.
Be it resolved by the town that it hereby approves the firm of Strategic Government Resources, SGR, to conduct the town manager recruitment process, and authorizing the Director of Administrative Services to enter into an agreement with SGR in the absence of the town manager. approved by the town council on September 14th, 2021.
So you're making that motion.
Making that motion. My apologies.
Lugo, I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, Lou,
Aye.
Kurt,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Brenda,
No,
Steve,
Nay.
Bill?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that, Lisa, you got that? 5-2. All right, thank you very much. That gets us.
Thank you.
You're welcome,
Thank you,
Mike.
Mike.
Thank you, Mike. 8-2, which is discussion on Zoom format for executive sessions. Lisa?
Okay, I put this on your agenda just with the thoughts of, there's times like tonight you had an executive session, but you also had your council meeting as well. But there are other times where you've had to have executive sessions. And I could see in the future, maybe there might be some with the search for the town manager or whatever that's going on, that it might be more accommodating for you to have the option to use strictly a Zoom meeting for an executive session if the council so desired. You could certainly decide if you want to be in person, but just to consider the ability to do a Zoom meeting, which would save you all from having to come out, especially if it's winter and bad weather or whatever. It'll give you that opportunity to do that, especially if you don't have any other meetings that evening or whenever. So I wanted to put on your agenda just to discuss it and maybe consider the option to maybe do that.
Okay, so basically we have to do something that says that we'll have the ability to conduct an executive session via Zoom if that's the choice. Is that how this goes, or?
That it should be, and I see here how it's worded in the draft resolution. It states hereby approves conducting Zoom format executive session meetings. Having the ability to decide to do it as a full meeting would probably be more appropriate language for that.
And the reason that we would have to do that is because our regular meetings are hybrid. So right now, the assumption is that our Zoom meetings would be hybrid. We
Right,
do not have the ability to do just a Zoom. We have to have hybrid because that's what we
right.
selected.
And the executive sessions are not open to the public.
Correct.
So that's
Okay.
the reason for the recommendation.
All right, so from a wording perspective, it's just basically we have the ability and the option to hold an executive session via 100% Zoom if the council so decides.
Right.
All right, anybody have any questions? Steve?
Just one question, thinking, Madam Chair, through you to Lisa, if we do go forward and want to do exclusively Zoom executive sessions and say it is somewhat like a night like this where we have executive sessions followed by town council, could we still hold it fully remote or fully through Zoom, but counselors could sit here with their laptops and participate on the screen, and then we just switch to the hybrid format once we're in a regular session?
Absolutely. And what I'm recommending is to have the ability as a council, if you want to decide to have the Zoom meeting, just a Zoom meeting, you all can decide to do that. Otherwise, you can do it with the hybrid approach, which would still be not open to the public. So you'd have both options, but the ability to just go strictly Zoom. That's the idea.
So if we're
But
here, we could still do hybrid if we're already here.
I think the main difference would be we probably wouldn't set up the owl camera if we would have, it would be here, but it wouldn't be set up and initiated. We would just utilize personal computers or devices. You know, if you're not on camera, you can just use your phone and call in, kind of situation.
Sure.
Okay.
Anybody else? No. All right, go ahead.
Steve Jones, I make a motion that be it resolved by the Tolland Town Council that hereby approves conducting Zoom format executive session meetings until April 30th, 2022, approved by the Tolland Town Council on September 14th, 2021.
Lugo, I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, Lou,
Aye.
Kurt,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Brenda?
She may have stepped away.
Yeah, I'm an aye, but I also want to note that I now unfortunately have to leave the meeting. So if you can make a note that I'm leaving the meeting at 8:18. And I hope you all have a good night. Sorry.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Steve? I'm an aye, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. 8.3, update on legal timeline for a cannabis referendum.
Okay, in response to our last meeting, I know we were looking at different thoughts regarding, if there was a possibility of a referendum regarding legalization of the sale of cannabis, et cetera. And I worked with and checked with our town attorney, and just to clarify a referendum process. It would be too late at this point to try to get it onto a current referendum due to the timing of a referendum process under the statute. The other side of this as well is that the town council cannot decide to put this on a referendum vote. It would have to be something that is petitioned by the public. Oh, sorry. That is petitioned by the public onto a referendum, and then it would have to go through what the state statute gives the allowance of putting that on with the 60 days prior to get it onto the ballot and everything that has to be done in order for that to happen. So like I said, had anything wanted to happen for this particular ballot, it's just too late, and I've got those dates included in here. I did consult with our town attorney about it, and like I said, the only thing that you can have a resolution to a referendum would be like for sale of bonds or sale of property or purchase of property, things like that. Our charter does specifically state that, but state statutes don't give any allowance except for under this for the public to petition. So I just wanted to bring that up to date for you to share that information. I have the communication as well from our town attorney included in your packet. So just to keep it for reference.
Okay, so if I'm hearing this correctly, this is perfect. This is what I wanted from Rick. I appreciate the time that he put into doing this. I'm sure we paid him to do it because it was a huge bill. If we're looking at the email from him that's in the packet, part of SB 1201 specifically says no municipality shall prohibit delivery of cannabis to a consumer, qualifying patient or caregiver when its delivery is made by a retailer, hybrid retailer, dispensary facility, dispensary service. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here basically saying the municipality can't prohibit it.
Right.
So the town council, based off of this law and our charter, cannot be the one to initiate a referendum asking the question whether or not the town shall be allowed to sell it. The assumption is all towns are allowed to have recreational facilities based on their zoning, which would kick this back into zoning sandbox. And if the public decides they don't want this, they would have to do the 10% of the electorals by a petition. And then that petition would be on the next referendum or the next.
It would not be,
next
it would be a
vote.
referendum on the next electoral vote.
Right, so the next
Not-
November vote,
Right.
not the May referendum.
It cannot be on your referendum.
Right, so it would, if people did a petition, even if they did a petition now, it would not be on any ballot until next November.
Right.
And at that point, if they had the 10% and got it on the ballot, then the town would vote. But until that happens, the assumption is that the town can't block it unless planning and zoning decides to block it.
You're right. It's more the planning and zoning. Well, the town council can also create ordinances or regulation with under
As we
the
should.
the allowance under this particular bill. It gives the council and the zoning board the allowance to make certain rules and
Right.
regulations. Normally, your planning and zoning board would be making those sort of code requirements. The town council would be doing more of the ordinance type requirements, such as what we have currently regarding drinking of alcohol, smoking in parks, things like that. That would certainly be something along the lines of what the town council can handle regarding the types of establishments in town. If there is going to be a sale and all that, growing, that is more along the lines of what planning and zoning would manage under their code that they manage.
Okay, so from my perspective on this, then I would like you to put on our agenda for you and I to talk about when we can get it on the town council agenda to look at the ordinances that we have to update. Anybody have any questions regarding this?
One quick question you answer to interim town manager Lisa Hancock. For the ordinances, do moratoriums fall under an ordinance for the town council, or is that also under the offices of planning and zoning? We did have a resident reach out kind of requesting the town council be more engaged in the process. And I think our joint meeting and my response to them was kind of, the breakdown was pretty clear that there's really strong language that indicates PZC has more cognizance over certain issues, and we have our own that we can cover, like the, not banning it in parks and playgrounds and other places that are town property. But they were curious if a moratorium would fall under our powers, or if it would be under planning and zoning if we could make a decision right away.
The moratoriums that I've seen so far have fallen under the town council's purview. I can certainly get you a better answer, a better legal answer, but most of them that I have seen, the town council has been the one to initiate the moratorium.
Okay, thank you. See, I did also, when I was trying to respond, I saw that there was, I think the town of Trumbull's Planning and Zoning Commission did a moratorium. So there's at least one example of a PZC doing that, but just want to make sure that's clear to the public in terms of what powers we have as the debate probably gets more engaged and lively.
I agree with Steve. I think I read this that we wouldn't, because a moratorium to not sell would be the town council saying no sales. So that doesn't seem to fall in our sandbox, our area of what we can and can't do. If the planning and zoning
Yeah.
decided they wanted to do a moratorium, then that would be of their ability, but not ours per charter and this law that I can see of. So if we want to get
Yeah, let me
clarification
get it
on that.
clarified because, like I said, I have seen other town councils do it.
Well, that's
So
why I'm,
maybe the legality of it isn't quite so, and I know there have been some questions going back and forth regarding the legality of a moratorium altogether on this particular topic. But let me get some information for you and then I'll share it with the town council. Or share it
Yeah,
with all
no,
of
thank
you.
you. It doesn't seem like a moratorium is an outright ban. I think it's more just a delay in the process to either gather more information or perhaps give other boards and commissions and the town staff time to kind of build up more information before there's really a full hearing on allowing it or not through the zoning commission. At least that's my interpretation of what the moratorium would do, but thank you.
Anybody else? No? All right, perfect. Thank you, Lisa, for giving that information. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, that gets us 8.4, appointments to vacancies on various municipal boards and commissions.
Yeah. All right, Steve Jones, I would make a motion to approve the following reappointments for the Cable Advisory Board for Larry Carcino and Paul Batterson Jr. for terms of 9/14/21 to 6/14/2023.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor, Lou,
Aye.
Kurt,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
aye. There you go, next.
All right, Steve Jones, and make a motion to approve the following new appointments for Planning and Zoning alternate Ryan McCann, Veterans Recognition Commission Carl Davis, sorry, for term of 9/24/21 to 11. For Veterans Recognition 9/14/21 to 10/31/21. And for the Permit Celebration Committee, Sophia Johnson for a term of 9/14/21 to 11/9/22. And I think I saw Carl might be on if you
Yeah,
wanted to
he
say
is.
hi or speak at all. You don't have to, but if you'd like to, I always appreciate seeing people's faces.
Yeah, I'm on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
It's Lulu. I'll second all those nominations.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, Lou,
Aye.
Kurt,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
aye. That's all of us. Thank you very much. That gets us to old business. 9.1, COVID fund relief fund update for the Board of Education and review of the funds left from last year. So I gotta get to my page now. Lisa?
Okay, this is just an accounting of the COVID relief fund that the town council approved for the Board of Education last fiscal year. Back in January of 21, they approved, you have all approved $283,508 to be allocated to this particular fund. The expenses of the fund are $283,352. Good. All right. And that leaves about $156 left in the particular fund. The superintendent, if you have questions, but included in your packet includes where the Board of Education requested their payments, approved their payments as their policy allowed. They approved it, the listing of what was spent. There's significant detail regarding the school food side of it of about $91,575. And then the printout from the Board of Education regarding their accounting of the remainder of the expenditures, which was about almost $192,000 there, is listed on the next page that looks like a spreadsheet.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Willett, thank you for joining. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions for you. So if you want to unmute and get ready. Does anybody have anything specific they want to ask before I do? Lou?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Dr. Willett. How are you, sir?
Hold on. Put on mute.
Sorry, good evening. Good evening. Thank you. Hi.
Through you, Madam Chair, that Dr. Willett, it appears that there's a lot of, there's a number of things that are included inside the expenditure report summary. That's the MMOBJA expenditure report summary, which includes salaries on, there's salaries, certified salaries, non-certified salaries, paraprofessional salaries, nurses' salaries, which, at least in my understanding of, what we were looking at as far as a COVID fund, when we were originally discussing it, this was for anything above and beyond what would be normal operating expenses. And for salaries, I'm seeing salaries as something that would normally be included as part of your normal operating budget. And so my concern is that this fund was being used to basically pay for salaries that should have normally come out of the normal operating budget for the Board of Education. And I was wondering if you could address that.
So the salaries that are listed there, I'd have to go to take a look specifically at what we did. It wasn't paying for any one person, but there were amounts paid to people for services rendered that fell under that line. And so that's generally where that comes in. The people that were helping with remote learning, there was something, I think, mail courier expenses. There were people that were working on COVID exposure letters. It's the ROCC, which is it's an operations COVID committee. There were people working on reopening plans, and there were extra hours that they did. So it wasn't any one person's salary per se. It was a lot of paying for these extra hours and things that happened that people had to be tasked that we did not have as part of the, as we did not know was going to be part of the picture. So I think that's what's falling in those lines, but I can check to make sure.
I'd appreciate that, because the other issue that I would have is for things like that, if it is something that's a COVID response that involves overtime or additional work or something else, isn't that something that would normally be covered under the FEMA COVID expenditures? Or something that would be reimbursable? I know that Ms. Hancock's shaking your head at me right now, so.
Walt, do you want me to respond to that?
Sure, yeah.
Under the FEMA allotment, we tried to request reimbursement for certain overtime expenses for the Board of Education. And they stated that it would not be covered under that. There was very limited salaries that would be covered. For example, they wouldn't cover even our own custodial staff working overtime or working towards the COVID situation. They kept changing the rules every quarter. One quarter, one thing was covered, the next quarter, then it wasn't covered. And we got into a whole debate with FEMA, but what it came down to was that they were not going to cover the cost of the hours for anyone from the Board of Education.
Okay, just because, and thank you for that clarification. Just because I see a breakdown here where it shows overtime for, like, you know, basically overtime payments for non-certified, overtime for other certified, but then you have a whole, like, you know, a list of 4 or 5 different positions where it doesn't look like it's overtime at all. It's just listed as salaries. So that's just a question I have. So I appreciate you looking into that and getting back to us on that, Dr. Willett. And then again, just again, through you, Madam Chair, that the other question I have is also, it appears that there was at least on one of the listings about $91,000 in food expenditures. And I guess my question is that when those food expenditures be paid through through other grants or other funding, either by USDA or by other agencies that you're already receiving reimbursements from?
I don't think that these were things that we got reimbursements for. They reimburse for the meals that are provided, but these items and the method used here was that our food service program for many years, you know, under the leadership of the director, who's done an amazing job, has always been self-funding. And during the pandemic, they took a hit with what's called a la carte sales, which meant that, you know, despite the money being recovered by USDA, they wouldn't be able to, you know, to balance the budget with the losses they were taking. So to do that, the board picked up the cost through the COVID fund of these items, and then also moved into salaries some of the work that they were doing, so that it could allow them to you know, to balance their budget. And that way we kept the food service program solvent. We do plan and do see that this year, because of the way that it's set up, thank God, and we're in person, the a la carte sales are going, everything seems to be going normally, that we would not need to do this again. I don't think we're going to need to, you know, to dip in and save the food service budget there this year. It was strictly last year's condition that we were in, where they really took some significant hits. So, you know, for many, many years, they've been completely self-funding. The pandemic really just hurt them, and a lot of other food service programs throughout the state were in a similar condition. So we had to do that to just help them balance their budget. And like I said, this year, we don't anticipate that being needed again.
All right, thank you very much for the clarification, Dr. Willett. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anybody else? Steve?
Just one question, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to, I believe Dr. Will might be the appropriate person to answer this question. So reading our item summary, there's a line that says there may be a request forthcoming from the DOE for additional appropriations. Would you happen to have any additional information about that, or is that pending a meeting by the Board of Ed?
I'm sorry, it broke up a little bit. Can you repeat that question? I apologize.
Yeah, so in the meeting packet, there's a line that says there may be a request forthcoming from the DOE for additional appropriations from the fiscal year 2021 balances. Would you be able to elaborate on that at all, or is that an upcoming Board of Education agenda item?
I don't see exactly what you're referring to, but what I would say, based on just what I'm hearing from you, there is a desire to, from the end of year, you know, end of year funds, to have the amount under the COVID agreement that the board, or the council had set up, there was a desire to transfer funds in that direction again at the end of this year, provided that fund is continued. Maybe that's what it's referring to, but the Education COVID Relief Fund, or CRF, from the town side, I know there's a desire to do that again if we can. The impacts this year, I can go into them a little now, but that's probably what you wanted to do in a future meeting. So I don't want to take your time if that's not what you wanted to be doing right now.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you, Dr. Well. I think Rini Esau spoke at the beginning about the request for a joint meeting, so that seems to be more appropriate time to have those discussions. Thank you, Madam.
Sure. And just a point of clarification, I think she was saying about the turf agreement. This would be about the CRF, but yeah, I think that both are desired.
You just want to spend a lot of time with us, don't you, Dr. Willett?
I do. I admire all of you. I'm just a big fan.
You missed the town council.
I do.
Anyone else have any other questions? Okay, so Dr. Willett, I have a few questions. And so in regard to what Vice Chair Jones was just saying, I kind of viewed this as the first kind of go round of what you guys spent the COVID money on this year, which was part of the condition of the fund too, was that, you know, we got an understanding of what the money was spent on, and a precursor to a discussion regarding extending the fund and what we want to do with that for next year. So I appreciate you coming and going over this. And Mr. Luba asked about the food services, and that was one that I was having a little bit of trouble wrapping my head around, but I think I'm okay. So if I heard you correctly, basically our food services program is self-sustaining, and that covers the salaries and the cost of the food and all the other stuff that comes along with food services. And the USDA is giving us funding based on the meals that we're providing, breakfast and lunch, to any student, any child under the age of 18 in the town. But the expenses were higher than the money that we're getting reimbursed from the FDA. And that's mainly due to the freaking cookies, Dr. Laura.
Cookies had a lot to do with it. People love those cookies. We just couldn't sell them.
Lunch
So.
thing, yeah, how can you spend so much money on cookies every day? But that a la carte offsets the cost and expenses of everything else. So because we didn't have the a la carte, we had excess expense over what the USDA was providing us. So that's what this $91,000 is to cover the difference of what we weren't bringing in.
Yeah, yes, that and we buttressed a bit some of the salaries for them too, or you know, some of the pay for them too.
All right, so I think that makes sense to me. And then from what Mr. Luba was saying, I'm understanding all of the salary items that are on here are in relation to things that people were doing above and beyond their regular job. This is not, we hired 3 people. This is stuff that people were doing to kind of get everybody through remote learning and everything else.
Yeah, mostly existing people that were being given funds to help cover bases during the pandemic.
Okay, so there's a few things, and if you don't have all this tonight, that's fine. I'm assuming when we have our joint meeting, we could go over it then too. But I had a couple of questions around what the transportation dollars were for. And then travel and conferences, kind of, that one was a little bit of I wasn't sure what it is. Operation and maintenance supplies, I'm assuming that one and the instructional materials, those $2 amounts there were more around all the different supplies we needed for when the kids were in school, cleaning and all that other stuff. I don't know if that's somewhere else. Instructional supplies, and then equipment, non-instruction new. Those are the ones that kind of really piqued me a little bit. I understand the graduation, that 15,000 is that was the cost for Rensselaer, correct? Yeah, that one I know. So I guess those were the only ones that I really had questions around. What exactly was in those, or what we were kind of doing for the students supporting that.
Sure. So I have transportation dollars, travel and conferences, supplies, and equipment on non-instructional new, right?
Because I know the computers were all separate, so I just wasn't sure what that 16,000 was for other equipment.
Okay, sure. And just let me just try to see what I have, and then I will come back also with more. So a lot of the transportation was, I think that was, and I'm just going to check on it, but mileage reimbursement for couriers during the pandemic. We had to have people transporting a lot of things to and from people's households, including children's households, different pieces of equipment, you know, manipulatives, computers and computer equipment, Chromebooks, that kind of thing. So there was a lot of reimbursing for mileage, and that might be part of that, but I'll have to go back and check. And that was, yeah, that's normally where travel and conference would incur something like that. So that's probably where that fell. Trying to look at supplies, but some of these I will have to come back. A lot of the supplies were custodial and things that we hadn't planned on or typically wouldn't be getting in a non-pandemic year. And so that was put in here. Also, mask extenders, sanitizers, disinfectants, partitions, things that normally wouldn't be part of that were also part of that, I think. We did have an expense for the buses, a product called Zuno, to sanitize all of them. And that was a highly effective methodology as described to us at the time that helped us continue to transport kids and have them be considered safe under the state's view and parent guardians' views. And I'm just trying to grab something for non-instructional real quick, but I will get back to you on that. Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that one.
And then the last question that I had is just how do these expenses cross over with the ESSER funds and what we're spending the ESSER funds on?
Most, and I'd have to get, nothing that came out of these funds came out of ESSER. ESSER we're using mainly for, in the case of, say, ESSER 3, for example, the vast majority of that is being used for staff to offset the losses for the pre-K 2 and pre-K 5 population by bringing on positions that are specific to the pandemic and that are limited in scope. There may be retirements during that time, and those people can maybe stay on, but these positions are mainly support positions, and in the case of ESSER 3 funds, actual teaching positions to offset those grades because the impacts were so severely felt in especially the lower kids' grades. So that's largely where the ESSER funds are going. There are some things that we can use ESSER funds for that are similar, but what was requested from these funds was not to double, say, in the ESSER. Things were purchased in ESSER prior to the availability of this. And when this became available, it actually allows us to use even more of those ESSER funds for that those staff support positions that you wouldn't want us to use maybe this for in the past. That ESSER was providing some additional supports in that way for that. Also, the extended school year program, we called it ESY. This was able to serve 300 plus kids this year, and that was largely due to the ESSER funds. It was expanded to the general education population because so many kids had experienced setbacks with respect to the pandemic and education. So the ESSER funds were also used to greatly expand the summer program, which was also one of the strong recommendations for the use of the funds. And you note that a percentage of it was against learning loss, which covers all those bases, and also intervention or remediation services. So a lot of those funds were used for those kinds of things. And these funds were used, as you've noted, to help save that food service program for the year, help provide those additional things that otherwise we would have probably not been able to do as much from the support of student side with the ESSER funds.
So you just mentioned something that if you have I'm sure you could probably go on about this for a long time, but if you could give us a little update. I'm happy to hear about the extended school year program, and I knew we were doing one. I didn't realize we were doing it for 300 kids. So can you kind of give a little update on how that went, and if you felt that was really helpful and successful for the kids going this next year, and like what we kind of did with that to help ensure, kind of like you said, getting them up to speed on the learning loss?
Yeah, it was very successful. It was I just wanted to just make a note. The surveys that we sent out, people responded just universally that they felt that was an extremely valuable program. We're in the process of doing, baseline assessing to see where we're at with the kids as they return. But we were noticing that, vast majority of the kids that were involved in it were both socially, emotionally showing benefits from it, but also it was really helping us kind of maintain and hold the position on, where they were from a learning standpoint. The state of Connecticut made it really clear that using, ESY funds, as we call them, and doing these summer programs needed to be fun, because they didn't want the kids to be miserable after an entire year of in and out and all kinds of COVID-related stress. So they also provided grant opportunities, and we took those grant opportunities in addition to the funds we had, in addition to ESSER funds, to avail themselves of things to avail the kids and give the kids opportunities to do fun things. Like there was a zoo kind of thing and other things that came in that the state's funds helped us provide. So the kids that were involved in it, it was universal that they were really engaged, they really enjoyed it, and we were seeing that the teachers were observing these kids to be getting academically a benefit out of it. And we expect to see that as we do our baselines for the beginning of the year for the kids that were involved. Any parent guardian could have involved the kids in the program. And I just wanted to kind of throw out that Patty Hess, Barb Daly Burns, Wendy Cody, and I'm forgetting one person, but they were really instrumental in the program, and just thanks to them for all the hard work that they did.
Thank you for that update. I appreciate that.
Jennifer Webster, I'm sorry. I want to make sure I get all the names out there. Like the Academy Awards here, if I miss somebody, it would be bad. So Jen Webster's another one to thank. I thank you for that, for her work.
Yeah, right. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So as I mentioned, I see this as kind of like our first look at these numbers, and that threw some questions at you to get some answers for, and then we'll set something up for a joint meeting to go over the COVID fund, and going forward, what the town council decides to do for the next year or so. And then the next topic was another separate meeting, but anybody else have any questions on the COVID fund dollars? No? All right, well, you can't get out yet, Walt, because we got you for 9.2 now too, so.
Okay. All right, I'm here.
Okay, your packet for 9.2 includes a lot of information that I put together. I tried to put a historical background together regarding the artificial turf field. And this is just a review, so we can answer some questions, give you a little background history on it, but the Board of Education would like to have a joint meeting to discuss not only the turf field, but the whole grounds maintenance contract, which I've included a copy of as well. So a lot of that information is in here. What I'm going to go through is in part of your background. It's just the little summary of where we were, how we got here. I also have information of what the current condition of the field is, and tonight online is Scott Lappin, our Public Works Director, and Bruce Watt from Recreation. So they will be available to answer any questions that you might have. Do you want me to go through the whole summary that I put together, or would you rather just ask questions going forward. I don't mind either way.
Why don't you go through the summary? Before Lisa goes through the summary, so the general overall of this, I asked Lisa to pull together some background for us on the history of the turf field. And the funding of it, all the financial pieces of it, because the turf field is going to be coming to the point that it has to be replaced. And I asked for a couple of different things, the history on it, some cost benefit analysis on keeping the turf field, knowing that every 10 years, you're looking at nearly $1 million to replace it. And also looking at a grass field replacing, which doesn't have the same kind of cost, or if it does or doesn't, just basically an understanding of it. And also, the Board of Ed wants a joint meeting on this to discuss it, because if the town decides or that we're gonna stick with the turf field, then we have to get this into the capital plan at some point
Well,
to,
it's there.
pardon me?
It is in the capital.
Right, it
plan.
is in there, right now. So we have to kind of decide how that's gonna work. Plan's coming up for approval soon. It's the beginning of the budget process, so we need to decide which way we wanna go on this, and we also have to do the whole fields agreement that is in here. It's a lot of information in here on the background and everything else. I don't expect everybody to, have everything nailed down tonight. We can go over the history of it. We can get where it all is in our mind. And as we heard from Rainey in the beginning, there's information in here that they didn't have. So I'm sure that they have information that we don't have, possibly.
Well,
So,
I know, I did share it, but I don't share it directly with them, so
right,
I'm sure it's gonna be available in a packet now that this is available here. But
right. And they'll have it in their Board of Ed packet for the town council meetings.
I'm sure.
So they can look at that. And then when we come together, we can kind of all sit down and discuss it overall. All right, so I'm gonna have Lisa go through the 2-page summary here. And then we can start asking our questions. And Lisa, what I'm thinking of is between the town council and the Board of Ed, we've got 2 joint meetings that we have to do.
You probably do it all in one.
I was gonna say it might be beneficial to pick a day and do a separate joint meeting to handle both items. That's obviously not Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, sometime in the month of October.
I will get with Dr. Willett so he can work with
Yep.
council.
Yep.
And
Let's get some
certainly
dates.
if all of you can give me some dates, not right this minute,
Yeah.
but share with me one by one via email. Don't copy everybody. I don't need an online meeting going on, but please share some dates in October on a Monday or a Thursday
Okay,
that all of you may be available. I could try to coordinate with the superintendent for the Board of Ed and try to come up with a common date in October.
perfect. All
Okay?
right, Lisa, if you want to go over the summary
Okay.
here.
So back in 2012-13, we installed a new artificial turf at the Tolland High School. That project cost back then was a total of a little over $1 million, and it was funded with $700,000 in grants. One of it, the grants was from STEEP, and the other was from state DEEP for an outdoor recreation grant. We also had bond issuance of $300,000 and an input of municipal funds of a little over $38,000. The $300,000 was supposed to be paid back for the debt portion through various resources. Some of it was, we were setting up a special athletic turf fund, and the program was for the town recreation director to lease out the field whenever it was available for public use. The Board of Education had a majority of the prime time for their programs, as well as the Tolland Youth Leagues, soccer, football. Also, the Athletic Association all had their share of the use of the field. Now, the youth organizations all committed to pay $5,000 apiece, so that was the football, soccer, and so forth. The remaining 15,000, because the debt payment is about $30,000 a year. The remaining portion of the debt was supposed to be funded with, and there's some miscommunication or misunderstanding with this, but there was supposed to be a golf tournament by the Tolland Athletic Foundation. They were supposed to maybe put on other fundraising events to try to raise that money each year to offset the other share that the youth leagues did not donate. That part did not happen. In addition, Bruce in our recreation department has rented out the fields where he could. Again, there was limited ability for timing for time for other leagues to use it, but there were some instances where we had lacrosse there. He had a semi-pro football team using it, leasing it, and we were able to use it in some times of the year. The town, we've collected from the sports league so far about $89,000. And each year, everyone paid their share as they should have, with the exception of last year. Town Manager Rosen reduced the amount each team would pay just because of COVID. They couldn't use the field. So they were basically paying for not even being able to use the field. So he reduced them down, I think, to $3,000 each, and they paid that. So regarding the other side of it, we did, with that athletic turf fund that we set up, that was to help pay for electricity at the field if the lights were being used, or if we had to have a custodian or somebody present, porta potties, things like that. So a lot of the funds that were going into there were to pay for all of that first. Then there was an agreement with the Board of Ed and the town to split any balance left over 50-50, which that's never happened because any balance that's been left over has been used to help offset the cost of the debt that the Tolland Athletic Foundation didn't do fundraising for. And like I said, there's a misunderstanding there. We were under the understanding that they were going to do it, and I'm being told that there never truly was a formal commitment for them to be on the hook for any part of that. So that wasn't under my regime or realm as far as those commitments, but that's the information that I have. So at this time, we had collected money. Bruce has done a great job with trying to sell advertising, whatever he could do to bring in cash, and that was pretty much used to offset the debt. Again, as I mentioned, field rentals are very limited due to the availability. So there really wasn't a lot of availability to earn anything else. The maintenance and use agreement of the board and the town. The board and the town entered into an agreement back in 2013. It was to renew in 5 years, and it seems that something didn't happen and get renewed. And back in June of this year, the Board of Education voted on the renewal of the field and grounds maintenance agreement, which I wasn't involved in that agreement, but I think Michael Rosen, the Board of Education, were all involved in the creation of this, as well as our public works staff. Within that agreement, the town would have the full responsibility for the maintenance of the artificial turf, with the exception of a one-time spring maintenance done by the Board of Education. The town has historically had the responsibility to schedule the field, maintain and oversee the operation of the field. We create the master schedule for the use of the field. The Recreation Department, again, markets it when it's not being used at the Board of Education. And the Board of Education is currently responsible for the maintenance and associated costs during their period of use, including the cost of public safety personnel during the events that they sponsor. Both the original and all the encompassing field and ground agreements are attached for more detail within the document. There was a question that came up if we had ever had to use the warranty that was provided with the original installation of the field. And it did come with an 8-year warranty originally. And there were certain maintenance requirements in order to keep that valid. Our school personnel, our public works department followed that maintenance requirement, and we had one warranty claim for the turf separating along the base of the track, and it was rectified under the warranty, and we did not have to pay for that. There was another question regarding any reported injuries, and when I checked with our superintendent as well as our recreation department, they were not aware of anything reported to the town. And the superintendent mentioned he wasn't aware of any major injuries except for a wrist injury that just happened recently. So we're not aware of any major injuries that were officially reported. The current field condition, we've had 2 companies come out and look at it and give us an analysis of the field. Both of them are stating that there's about a two-year life remaining to the field. Now, since we had the pandemic and the field wasn't used as much in the last year, we could probably extend that a little bit. And what's not in here is when we put it into the capital program, we took that information into account as to the year where we put it into the capital budget. And we did put it into the capital budget as a replacement of an artificial turf field at that point. So it's in out years within your budget. I think it's in there for around $800,000. Fibers are beginning to break down and they're starting to mat due to use and age. There's several seams that are showing on the sidelines and several seams are loose. I attached some of the pictures. The high use reflects wear in various areas. Then we did have to use our engineer to try to get some of the estimated costs if we were to replace the field rather than with grass rather than artificial. So with the artificial turf, the estimate is in fiscal year 23-24, the cost estimated there is about $825,000, with a $10,000 a year cost for maintenance. That would include, there's like a sweeping that the staff has to do. There's other types of sanitation that has to happen. All of that and the labor for that is included in there. Although it's typically less during the first years while under warranty. So you're not paying as much in your first few years under warranty if there's other little maintenance things that come up. The turf is professionally sanitized each year. We have annual testing and inspection that's required, and it is done. And we also purchased a special tractor equipment after we installed the turf, because that was part of the warranty requirement that we had to use this special piece of equipment. It has it has like a brush attachment and it has magnets in it. So if there's any sort of metal in the field, it's picking up those items as it's going through and brushing the field. So it fluffs it and pulls that stuff out. Now, if we were to replace the artificial turf with a grass field, the estimated cost for that is about $715,000, and that includes design fees. So the grass itself is about $670,000 and another $45,000 for design fees. The annual maintenance that would be required is about $40,000 a year, and that would require labor to mow the grass each week, fertilizing, aerating. We have to put an irrigation system in to water it, overseeding, line painting, and it would require more personnel time to make all that happen. It would add a significant amount of work to the maintenance and the preparation of the field for games. Currently, and I probably have it in the commentary, currently now, a lot of the lines required for soccer or football are sewn right into the artificial turf. With grass, you have to put this special paint on each time they're going to be playing their games, and it doesn't last like the turf would have in there. So just under the commentary of real grass, artificial turf, I just pointed out some items for your attention. The grass field will require free draining base under the loam so it'll dry quickly. If it doesn't dry quickly, you'll lose playing time on the field because of a soggy surface, where you don't have that right now with the artificial. The field will need to be irrigated to maintain the health of the grass and not develop weeds, and also not to burn if we have a really hot season. The grass would have to be mowed and repainted weekly, as I mentioned, and the artificial turf does not require that. The high school uses the field for football, soccer, lacrosse, both men's and women's. With all this playtime, the grass will wear out quickly in areas such as goal mouth, the penalty kick area, the face-off spot for lacrosse and soccer. All these issues can only be addressed with no playing on the field for a period of 6 weeks if new sod is put down, or months for grass to germinate. This makes the field unavailable, and then an alternate site would be required to provide a similar playing surface for different sporting activities. The cost to replace the sod would add to the annual cost as well. We do not have an estimated cost for that at this time. Line painting can be a challenge. For instance, soccer uses white lines, lacrosse and football use different colors. Different paints would be needed to be purchased and done frequently. The artificial turf has these already in their field. The artificial turf would not require fertilization or similar maintenance as a grass field. And the artificial turf would allow for more playtime and less relocation costs. There certainly is a cost benefit to each approach. And certainly I've tried to give you the information for you to make your educated decision on which way you'd like to go once you meet with the Board of Education and discuss it with them. I just try to give you enough background to try to understand both sides of the issue. The other thing is the community concern. I have no idea how the community would feel of an artificial turf going away and a grass field coming in. They may like it, they may not. But that's just something that, as far as my input, I would say maybe we need to try to get a gauge or a feel of what the community feels as well. And if you did go with an artificial turf, I would recommend that we build it into if the goal is to continue to replace the artificial turf, then to set aside funds every year, and like we do with some of our major pool vehicles and things like that, put the money aside every year, set aside, invest it in capital reserves, and then have enough to try to replace it without having to worry about where the funds will be coming from in the future. And so that would be my recommendation if you did decide to go in that route. Attached here, you'll find pictures of the field, pictures of some of the wear and tear. The report from the people that we had review the turf and for the condition. There's all kinds of information that's in the backup here, a copy of the warranty, the original turf agreement, the new turf agreement. So with respect to that, I think I'd like to open it up if you have any questions. Like I said, I have Scott and Bruce both here as well to maybe answer more of the technical questions.
Okay, anybody have any questions before I go? Steve?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few quick questions. Chair to Lisa, were the general commentary items that were presented, was that from solely Bruce and Scott in terms of just the general summary, or did we get any feedback from, I don't know if they're even relevant to the conversation, about Pete Zaba from the Board of Education or any of their staff for kind of the general maintenance of their buildings?
We did have some input, not only from Bruce and Scott, but we also had input from our engineer that did the analysis for the cost benefit. I know we did speak to Peter, and I think some of his information was also shared in here, but there was a lot of a joint concern. But certainly if Walt has any additional input that he'd care to share.
I think probably I'll wait till the joint meeting to do that, but I appreciate your offering. Thank you.
And then the next question I had regarding, I think there's some concerns about staffing and the limitations that might exist. I was wondering either Scott or Bruce will be able to elaborate a little bit further. If we switch to a fully back to a grass field, would they in turn probably request additional staffing in future budget years, or would it instead be kind of more a limitation of what they would cover, that certain fields might get a little less focus than they've had with our artificial field?
I will let Scott share his input as well, but I could see a number of different things forthcoming. It could include overtime if we're trying to manage getting everything done. I know they struggle right now with trying to address all the fields during the summer. It could be a request for another position. Like I said, I'll let Scott speak to that. Scott, would you like to speak to it?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. To start with, I think, while what Steve Jones has brought up is a viable concern, I think the biggest concern that we have, or the biggest hurdle, is you have to have an alternate site available to play on, because when you all of you people who have watched soccer games, the goalie is back and forth in that goal mouth all the time. The penalty kick areas, the face-off areas, they take a lot of abuse. They have to be addressed probably on a basis of once a year, where we would go in and replace sod. Sod takes about 6 weeks to take hold. That means 6 weeks of nobody playing on a field, or that sod's not going to last. If it's a bigger area that has to be replaced, and we go with grass seed, as you guys know, when we did Lions Field, we couldn't go on there for over a year because it took that long for the grass to mature. That being said, as far as grass versus the artificial turf, yes, we'd have to mow it, paint it every week based on who's using it, different color paints. It would have a serious impact on our staff, because right now we don't have to do that. We go out once a month with the tractor that Lisa talked about, which fluffs up the rubber pellets underneath. It has a magnet on it, so anybody who was wearing, whether it was a bracelet or barrette or whatever, it picks all that up to limit any safety issues out there. As well as the field has the lines either sewn in, or they're basically made that way right from the factory so that we don't have any maintenance really to do on there. There's no irrigation. Below those rubber pellets is a drainage system that works very well. You could actually go out there and play during a rainstorm and not have puddles form, provided the drainage system is free and clear of any blockages. Whereas with a grass field, you can't do that, because no matter how much of a free draining base that you put in there, which is basically bank run gravel and stone and things of that nature, the sod or the loam that the grass has its roots in is going to hold water, and it becomes slippery. It's not the same playing field as what most of these kids are used to going from school to school. It's a much bigger maintenance commitment for our staff than a artificial turf.
Thank you, Scott.
And what maybe one other question through Chair, probably to Scott as well. In addition to staff, would you foresee an accelerated breakdown of any of your capital equipment that you're currently using? And not having the schedule in front of us, I'm sure there's probably some equipment that might be in the 5-year plan that needs to be replaced in relation to fields and ground maintenance.
Well, fortunately, we purchased a new line painter, I believe 3 years ago, and we kept the other one as a spare, so I don't think that would be an issue. The only other thing that would be used out there is a mower, and we have our 16-foot Toro mower in the budget for next year for replacement, and it's a real tight mower, so you get a much better cut on the grass. The other thing we have to consider as well is if we have rains like we've experienced this year, we can't get on a grass field without rutting the field up while we're mowing it. You'd have to let it dry out. And the way things have gone, throughout this our entire state is we no sooner start to dry out and we get hit with a deluge of rain again. And if that grass grows, 2 or 3 inches, not only do we have to mow it probably twice, but we'll have to go out there with blowers and blow the grass clippings off of the field, because this mower it's not like something that has a bagger on it. It just mows very fine, like what you see out on fairways on a golf course.
Thank you. And then maybe just one other comment. I'm trying to scan the document for kind of our rules and regulations, but just a point of note to consider whenever we get to that joint meeting. The ordinances we talked about earlier for cannabis use, we might want to make sure that if you have to update anything with this agreement, that is in alignment both with any school regulations regarding cannabis as well as our cognizance over the field, kind of comparable to the conservation areas and trails and parks and stuff. So that's it for me for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? Kurt?
Fair. So I guess just my question, maybe this is probably for Bruce. I mean, you're not going to win me over on any monetary arguments between a turf or regular grass field. The thing that I really like to consider is compared to the other fields in town, the grass fields that we have in town, what's the usage compared to I mean, I know we've mentioned how much they get used, what sports teams use them and whatnot. But compared to the other fields in town, what's the usage like? Are we doing the same number of practices and games on the high school field as we are in other parts of the town, or are we not as many practices in the field? What's the situation like that? We talk about the grass being damaged, and that's certainly a concern, and being washed out every time it rains, certainly. So is because we have a turf field there now, are we able to use it significantly more than other parts of the town?
Bruce, are you available to answer that question?
He was yelling in the air.
There he is.
I would definitely say that the turf field gets more usage than our normal or a regular grass field. I think like Scott was saying, you don't get all that wear that comes along with playing on the grass field. We try to rotate some of the gameplay and practices kind of season to season on some of these fields just to get them some rest on there. Whereas the turf field, you pretty much can, play on it year round. I want to say Monday through Friday, that field is going, anywhere from when school gets out until, depending on the season, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, where you're not going to see that on our grass fields, as well as no lights on the majority of our grass fields. So there is some rest time with those, with the natural grass field. I think like Scott was saying, if we had, I guess if you had lights on everything, and we weren't circulating the use on those natural grass fields, I think we wouldn't have as good as conditioned grass fields as we do right now. So I would say there's a significant more usage on that turf field, especially through the week. On the weekends also, you're going to have some games here and there on the Saturdays, but like in the fall, football is on that field from 7 in the morning through about 5, 6 o'clock at night. And those football players would put some good wear on a natural grass field where the turf field's going to absorb a lot of that, I guess, abuse, if you will, that these sports leagues are putting on. To kind of go along with the positive of that turf field is, like Scott was saying, with multiple sports, you're going to have those natural wear spots on grass fields in the goalkeeper area. Those spots on the for lacrosse will be in a different area because their field dimensions are different. On this turf field, you're not going to have the wear from the major wear from the goalkeeper, the goalkeepers from the lacrosse field and the football players all over the field. Or if we had multiple use fields on our natural grass fields, I think you'd see a lot more wear where you don't get that with the turf field.
Okay, so I mean, you definitely feel that it gets more use, regardless of the fact that, the fact that it's lighted, it just is, you can use it constantly. Is what you're telling me.
Yeah, I mean, even like Scott was saying, with all this rain that we had last week, the girls' soccer team was still able to have their game last week during during one of the rainstorms. It wasn't a complete downpour or anything, but if it was on a natural grass field, I think that game would most definitely had to been canceled.
Very much appreciated, Bruce. Thank you.
You're welcome.
John?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Lisa, you mentioned 2 different companies examined the field in 2020. They mentioned that there's about 2 years left of life remaining. But the pandemic slowed the use of the field, so maybe that can be pushed out a little bit. My question is, if we were to push out the replacement of the field, a lot of times with these big ticket items, if you schedule it to be purchased at a certain time, you get a certain price, but if you delay it, the price will go up. So is there a potential that we could be looking at a price increase if we do happen to delay this for a period of time, or is that something we don't need to worry about?
There's always that potential. I know that our engineers gave us like 825,000 in the most current estimate, and I think we put, and I could be wrong, did we put 825 into the capital budget, gentlemen? Or did we have 800?
Yeah, that I can't answer, Lisa. You and back when we discussed this, you took it from me and put it in Bruce's budget, and I really don't know what the final figure was.
I'd have to get back to you, but yes, there's always a chance that that could happen. But with the way that I needed to fund it, I also had to take into account the impact on debt and in our debt management plan. So we put it out a couple of years with the hopes of it not going up that much.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, so I've got questions. One thing that was a little concerning to me is on the reported injuries. I'm concerned either that stuff's not getting reported or we're not, like, it's not being kept somewhere, but I know personally multiple ACL, MCL, concussions, and bone breaks that have happened in my kids' teen plus years, just soccer, just girls soccer
On that field?
on that field. So that's a little concerning for me. Question in relation to the maintenance and use agreement. I'm a little confused because it says, the maintenance and use agreement includes the artificial turf field that the town takes care of it, but then in the bottom it says the Board of Education is responsible for maintenance and associated costs during the period of use, including the cost of public safety personnel during major events. So are they responsible for it? Because let's be honest.
You're talking about the original contract.
Well, I'm
correct?
talking about that paragraph. So I don't know. It says in June 2021,
Right.
the board voted on.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure if this is saying that the town is responsible for it or the school is responsible for it, because I would venture a pretty educated guess that the majority of the use of it is the school.
It is.
So I'm not sure if this conflicts each other as to who's responsible for the maintenance.
Scott, do you want to elaborate on that, please?
As far as the town, as far as public works goes, our arrangement for maintenance is the only thing. We used to hire a contractor to come in. They would sanitize the field in the spring. They would test the field for density to make sure that it had enough rubber pellets and it was fluffed up. And then we paid the bill, but then it was considered an in-kind service to the Board of Ed, so they paid us back. So last year we decided that Peter would carry it in his budget. It would no longer be, we reduced our budget, Peter increased his, instead of us paying for it and then having them pay us back. Other than that, the only maintenance we do is we go out there, like I say, monthly, we go over with a tractor. If there's an issue, we're the ones that reach out to the contractor. I believe it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, right along the edge by a drainage device. The artificial turf had started to separate. We reached out to the original vendor. They came out, made the repair, and that was all overseen by our Parks Division. During our recent discussion with this, the grounds agreement, it was Mike Rosen, Dr. Willett, Pete Zataba, myself, Paul, Dennis, and Bruce. And the discussion was that the Board of Ed felt that they're the ones who use the track more than anybody else. They would take that on. Whereas the town, between recreation and the other sports, the town would take the responsibility of getting or putting the turf replacement in our budget.
Okay. All right, so I think that helps. We might want to clarify that wording a little bit though, Lisa, because it does look like it's not really clear on who's responsible for what on that. In regard to the cost, you said that that quote's from a couple of companies. Is the 825 the best quote?
Bruce, with the other companies that we got the replacement cost, that was different. The 825 in this report, the summary report, that came from our engineer who used current data that he has. But Bruce, we got a couple of quotes from other vendors when we were putting the capital project together. There were different types of turf, which I think are still sitting in my office.
Lisa, can I just jump in quick?
Sure.
The Tammy, if I'm not mistaken, I think one of the questions you had posed to us was, or concerns, was that you didn't really want to rely on somebody who could possibly be looking to sell us a new field to give us a price or do an evaluation on the field. So this is why we reached out to our town engineer, because they have a special division that just does athletic fields. And we felt this was the best way to get a very close estimate as to what it would cost for a replacement, including the, you know, when you talk about replacing that field, it's not just pulling up the side. You have to get rid of all of those rubber pellets that are underneath that have always been a concern, you know, and as of late, they came up as a health concern. Then you have to excavate down to get the drainage. Even though there's drainage under this, you'd have to put drainage down further because of it would have to be under the base. There's a lot that goes into it. And again, along the same thought lines that you had, we didn't want to just rely on, you know, somebody who was coming in to sell us a field and say, yeah, this is what you need to do. So that's why we went with our town engineers firm.
All right, so that makes sense then. So that's not a quote from a company, that's a quote that the engineers came up with from working with people that saying, all right, that makes more sense to me. And you mentioned the rubber pellets. So is the idea that we're gonna replace with that? Because you're right, there's a lot of concern around carcinogenics, the fact that it's just a bunch of ground up tires, which is.
Right. I believe the new fields have a brand new, it's, you know, somebody's not gonna come in and put their synthetic turf on top of an existing base. They're going to remove all the base and put in the most current materials that I'm sure have improved since this field was put in.
That's good to know. Okay, and Lisa, you had, what John had mentioned is the possibility of pushing off the for a year or two because of COVID. Do we have any kind of timeline on what we're looking at that we would have the opportunity to kind of figure that out?
I think it's in 24 in our current capital budget. So that includes it being pushed to where we felt it would be time to start replacing it.
Okay, so what's in there currently is factored into it.
Right.
Okay. Okay, I had a question regarding a couple of different things with funding on this. This is probably a better question to do at the joint meeting, but something I'd kind of like to float out there is there any opportunity where we can use any money from excess at the end of a budget to kind of go towards this? Because here's my concern with the turf field across the board. Besides the injuries that I know are there, I have concerns around it being $925,000 every 10 years to replace this, which equates to roughly $93,000 a year that we're paying in taxes for this field. And when you look at the replacement with grass field, it's front load heavy with the $715,000, you know, but in 20 years, we're still paying $93,000 a year to replace the turf field. Whereas in 20 years, we're just looking at, you know, our cost goes down every year on a grass field because it's just maintenance, and you don't, while you might have to resod, you're not going to dig up an entire field, and it's not $715,000 every 10 years. So the cost benefit analysis gets better the further out you look. So my concern is really, like you had said, how do we put money aside every year if we're saying it's going to cost this town $93,000 a year for this field at minimum? That's a lot of money. And I know there were a lot of dreams and a lot of things out there that we were going to recoup most of this money, and, you know, we were going to have all this stuff happen, and we just didn't see a lot of it come to fruition. And I give the youth sports teams a boatload of credit for continuing to pitch in their $5,000 a year for usage. But the town was sold that this wasn't going to cost us anything, and it has costed us, and it's going to continue to cost us every single year. So I'm very supportive of going out to the community to get feedback on this. I do understand the benefits of a turf field. As I said, 3 kids played, 2 kids played in college on grass fields. I understand the benefits of being able to play in the rain. I understand having that field available for the majority of the year, but it's $93,000 a year for that field. So that's a big chunk of money that I would like to try to find a way to mitigate for the town if we decide to go forward with the turf field. There are a lot of pluses with it. There are also negatives I think we need to acknowledge and look at. So when we do meet with the Board of Ed, which we'll get on the calendar, I'd like to kind of talk about a plan for how we're going to fund this. And whether or not we continue on with the youth sports and then using it. And like Bruce had mentioned, I'm just concerned because we need to be honest and upfront with the fact that we're not going to be recovering this money from hypothetical people that are going to drive up to Tolland to play on our turf field and pay us. So this is a $93,000 a year expense for this town to pay in tax dollars. So, and it's basically going to be a new expense because last time we only bonded $300,000 and we got back less than 100,000 of that. So we're going from a $200,000 commitment to $1 million commitment, and that's a lot of money. And technically, it's an amount of money that's going to have to go to referendum because it's over the 1% of the budget, 500 and something thousand. I thought.
No,
No.
that's something else you're thinking about.
Okay. All right.
We fit it in with the non-referendum.
Oh, we're doing it with
allowance, the
okay.
5% of the
Okay.
grand levy, which the way we factored it into the debt management plan included that. Certainly another thing to think about, though, but you know, who knows in 10 years down the road if grants will be available.
Mhm.
You know, there could be grants available. You can't get a grant ahead of time and stick it in a savings account, but you know, those are the other things you think about. So do you fund 93,000 a year?
Well, that's a good question
That's
too,
a big
Lisa.
hit. That's a big hit
It
to
is.
the budget.
It's at $93,000 a year.
I agree with
This is not chump change. So a good point you just brought up is the original 1 million. There was a large steep grant for this. So
And we had about 700,000.
$700,000 in grants, right? I don't know if there's an opportunity to do any kind of grant funding. I can always look at bonding, but we just got $1 million. I don't know that Tolland's gonna get, you know, a lot more for a field after the $1 million for the fire department. So it's worth an ask. But if there's any kind of other grant funding that's available to mitigate that, because that's really
Sure,
what
that's all the things that we would have to look at going forward. But right now, you really can't apply for any grants or anything until you have
right.
your plan in place and closer to the timeline of when you're doing it.
Yeah. Steve?
Just one other question, just because you mentioned potential injuries and the lifetime, and if we extended it out. I tried to look for any information. Would we have any potential liability issues if we pushed it out beyond what the manufacturer says its useful life in the event someone was injured on the field? Would they be able to make a potential claim that because we didn't replace it within a timely manner, that we would be held liable as a town for their injuries, or would that be something to reach out to the town attorney about?
We'd probably want to reach out to our insurance agent, which Mike Wilkinson deals with directly, but like Mike said earlier, as far as legal things, anybody could sue for anything. So, you know, I know there's certain statutes out there that guide injuries like on sidewalks and things like that. I'm not sure what the statutes would be if someone getting hurt on a playing field. You know, but there's certainly certain liabilities. And yes, if you are negligent in managing and taking care of your property and someone gets hurt because of our negligence or whatever, I'm not saying you,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? If there's any negligence, then certainly that could lead to some.
Yeah, no, it's in no way to create an urgent matter of the field, just more so just keeping it in the peripheries if we decide to extend the capital plan at any point, just to make sure we're kind of aware of that. And yeah, I was gonna say, I did note that Rini had their hand up.
I don't know if you're taking questions at this time.
Well, she's part of the finance committee over there in the Board of Ed, so I'm probably going to exercise my ability to recognize her. But before we do that,
Mhm.
to answer that,
Yeah,
I know specifically if anybody gets injured on the field even now, there's insurance and the town is liable to pay for the healthcare part of it. I know because again, children injured.
breaks and such.
Yeah, exactly. Breaking wrists and fingers. and
You're the
all that.
one.
Yeah, there's more than me, trust me. But if you get injured on that field currently,
Okay.
you know, you can file with the school, for an insurance claim for the cost of the healthcare and such like that. And that's regardless of the, standing of the field. What I'd be more concerned about is a civil case if somebody was hurt because the field was in disarray, which I don't think our field is in disarray by any means, but, that would be, and I think that would probably be covered under liability insurance also, but I do know the healthcare piece
We
of
have
it.
a pretty significant deductible as well. I
Okay.
think it's, Mike can answer that, 25, 50,000. I think it's 25,000 at least
Yeah,
deductible.
so,
That covers it for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
okay, and I am gonna recognize Rini Bisa. You have a question, Rini?
Yes, thank you, Tammy. I just wanted to say, we had gotten a report that the town had received $125,000 towards usage of the field since it was put in place. I know we've been talking about 89 here, so I'm not sure what that differential is, but we were told 125, not including last year. It kind of equated to about $25,000 a year. So I was in my, math sort of thinking, well, and again, I thought we had 4 to 5 more years that could be another 125. So that was just sort of a thought. I understand all of the thoughts and, everything around the field, but I did want to just bring up that we were given a number of 125 that had been received for usage, rental, whatever it was of the field.
Okay.
Can I respond to that?
Yep, go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. Hi, Rini, this is Lisa Hancock, and you are correct. The number of 125,000 is very close to the total revenues. What I did was, when I put it in my report, I segregated out what the youth teams paid in versus what we collected through our recreation department for rental fees and things like that. So if you take the two numbers of the 89 and another 42,000, that comes close to what you're talking about. It's not exactly 125, but.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify what the difference in the numbers was.
I just broke it out a little differently, so I'm sorry for that confusion.
Okay, so anybody else have any questions or anything? All right, so I think we should get the joint meeting on the agenda and we can discuss there about community feedback and concerns or anything back and forth, see where the Board of Ed's head is on this. And I would really like to talk about any kind of contingency that we can find to try to put money towards the purchase of this to reduce the, again, $93,000 a year that we pay for this field. Or will be paying for this field, I will say, because that will be the cost going forward. All right, we're going to go on to 10, report of the interim town manager.
Okay. Included in your packet, the only thing I'm going to point out in the town manager report, I have everything here, is that I did include the annual summary of the utility reserve fund, which we share with the Board of Education. And you will see that the numbers on this report, it's on page 14 of the town manager report, just kind of outlines where the town and the Board of Ed ended regarding that fund this year. So I just wanted to point that out to you. We did use some of the money for capital purchases in both sides and got some significant projects accomplished. In addition, I know you like the public status of boards and commissions regarding the who's in person and all. So I have that list for you. In person right now is the Blight Review Committee, Permanent Celebration, Veterans Recognition, and WPCA. Fully remote is Birch Grove Primary School Building Committee, Commission on People with Disabilities, Conservation Commission, Housing Authority, Library Advisory Board, Parks and Recreation Board, Tolland Mental Health and Substance Use Advisory Task Force, and the Tolland Water Commission. Now hybrid, we have the Board of Education, EDC Economic Development, Planning and Zoning, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. That's the update I have on those and their commissions. Just a couple things, just to keep you apprised of what I've been doing. I met with the EDC at their last meeting. I kind of shared some ideas that I have regarding the town and trying to at least get some of our empty spaces filled up, and maybe even promoting some of our areas that have not been developed. So I just shared some ideas. They thought it was a good idea, and that was to maybe bring some real estate and developers and other interested individuals into our town, maybe take them on a tour. We'll get an inventory together, take them on a tour of the various areas, and try to entice them to come to our community. Make that work. I've also been meeting with different developers in town, talking about some potential initiatives, which I'm not free to discuss at this moment. And also last Thursday, I visited the town of Coventry, and they had a sort of like an event in their Coventry village. And they took us on a tour. I met with their manager, their planning director, and there were several officials from other towns there as well, and agencies that I was able to at least communicate with, make some connections on ideas of how to do things. But on their main street, they discussed their initiative. They had various grants. They refurbished some buildings. They made it more of a walkable village with different types of businesses and unique types of businesses. So for example, they have this one car dealership that they brought in, that it's used cars, but they're unique used cars that people come from all over the United States just to visit Coventry to get these little tiny Japanese cars, or they're very small. You know, some of them only have one seat, and they're like little tiny trucks. I don't know if you've seen those before, but it's right on their main strip. They are Tim Ackert.
Tim, yep.
Yeah, his business is right there, right in front on the main drive. So we got a little tour of his establishment. And there's restaurants. So the idea is they have this unique car dealership. For example, people are coming from New Jersey and Pennsylvania all over to come to this place to buy these cars. Well, now they're spending money at the Bidwell Tavern and seeing some of the other areas of town and some of the things they've done. They turned into an old building, an old mill that was falling apart. Got a grant for that, and now it's a function center, sort of like how we have the lodge. I'm trying to think what else they had, but there's all kinds of seasonal events downtown that they do to try to, they put a visitor center in, a lot of different types of businesses to get people together into their center of town. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And there's a Main Street group that I want to reach out with, but I also want to reach out with David to meet with Eric, their planning director, and maybe and the town manager, try to get some other ideas as well. Certainly that's all part of the 4-town initiative as well, as trying to increase some of the marketing of our 4 towns together as well. So that was one thing that I've been getting involved with and learning about and trying to see what we could do for our community. I know there's certain limitations, but the only other thing, with our Public Works Director, I've been meeting with him. There's been an awful lot of issues with this extensive rain that we've been dealing with in town. And our staff is trying to keep up with keeping catch basins clear, cleaning as much as we can. Again, we have 3,000 catch basins in town and limited equipment to manage it. The one machine we had is not working very well at all. So what we had done was budgeted money in our budget to try to at least get a vendor in here to help clean out some of these basins. Well, with the state bid, their priority is to deal with the state. And trying to find these vendors to help with the stuff has been extremely difficult. So we're discussing what to do. There is a piece of equipment in our capital plan further out, but now the demand for having to maintain these catch basins is becoming more severe. So we're going to try to see how we can handle this for the future, but because outsourcing is just not working with the amount that, they charge by the hour and they're not performing as quickly as they could be when we do get them. So I just want to let you know that, you may be seeing something moving up in our capital plan, but again, I have to look at the impact on our debt for the future. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed, and the pot is only so big. So I've got to see what I can do with trying to make it happen. But I just want to give you a heads up about that to tell you, because I know, there's probably been concern shared with all of you regarding flooding and things like that. And like I said, we're doing the best we can. Certainly the public, not that it's their job to clear anything, because our people are out there. But if they see their catch basin filling up with a bunch of debris and we haven't gotten there yet, certainly let us know. We could send someone out, as quick as possible, or by any means, if you feel comfortable with doing it, with cleaning out, if you see a bunch of paper or something there or twigs, feel free to pull it out of there, just to help in the meantime. But
I get the one at my end of my driveway all the time.
thank you.
My
We
husband's like,
appreciate that.
what are you doing?
Our public works
Don't you
staff
see how dirty
appreciates
it is?
that. Again, we try to keep up with it.
Yeah.
So that's all I had.
Let's have that conversation. Let's look at that equipment and the cost of it and all of that. Let's have that conversation sooner than later, because it is something that I've heard a lot about from people about the flooding and that. So let's try to have that conversation fairly soon.
We'll work on it. Yes.
Just one good question. So great to hear that you went to the Coventry event. Are there still ongoing meetings with the Fort Town Economic Development Group, or did it kind of get suspended, or?
Well, I've attended one.
Okay.
The one that I attended was more of like the Tolland County
Chamber of Commerce?
Chamber of Commerce was involved, and it was more for events rather than any sort of coordinated economic development.
Okay.
I know there's different pieces. So the only one that I've been invited to so far was that one, which was interesting. They have some things going on. But my goal is to try to gear it up more to what it should be, beyond sharing events and things like that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you mentioning kind of like the see something, say something about the catch basins. That's good public works, right? If someone wanted to make a request, I know that was kind of one of our goals in the past with the council, that we wanted to have some kind of way for people to report any incidences that would go through public works.
Yes, and we have on our webpage,
Yeah.
Right in the corner.
yeah, that any citizen could file whatever concern they have right online. It'll get to them. Certainly, if it's a weekend and we're not in the office, there's always voicemail, but if it's an absolute emergency, you have a tree down in a road or something, just call 911 dispatch, and they know how to reach our public works staff to determine, who comes out. Is it a fire department issue? Is it fire and public works? they have the numbers to reach those people, because we had some individuals just calling Public Works and there was no answer. Well, it was a weekend, they wouldn't get an answer. So, and then I just tried to have our website redesigned to highlight, you know, if it's an emergency, call 911 and all that.
Thank you.
I have a question. Now that you brought up the website and the button, I was talking to a business owner today
Mhm.
who had a question for DPW. Do we know, I directed them to the website and I
Okay.
told them to use that because they did call. And they may, I'm not sure what day they called. It may have been a weekend and he told me that nobody answered. So I said, I told him to go to the website. Do you know what the response time is? Because I wanted to kind of follow up with them, or what are their response times running at these days for these types of requests?
I can get back to you.
Okay.
I know I've used that site myself, because we try to use it for different internal things as well. I don't know if I rate or what, but I get fairly quick turnaround with what I've asked for. However, I'll ask that question and get back to you.
Very good. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, that gets us to 11, adoption of minutes.
All right, Steve Jones, I make a motion to adopt the minutes as laid out in 11.1 and 11.2.
This is Kurt Chenero, second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Lou?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Aye. That's all of us. All right, 12, correspondence to council. Brenda is not here.
We'll see that for next meeting.
Table that. 13, chairperson's report. I don't have a lot. I just wanted to say I did go to the EDC meeting to talk about possible business opportunities that hopefully we'll be getting from the state. There was a law passed that has to do with helping people with disabilities find employment opportunities. And in that law, by November 1st of this year, there's supposed to be a concerted plan that would be put in place effective July 1st, 2022, where businesses would be incentivized to modify hiring practices and interview practices and incentivized to hire people with disabilities at full rate wage jobs to help with independence, et cetera, and also help the business. So I talked about that as an opportunity for the Tolland businesses, which is a good idea. And I just wanted to remind everybody, as Councilor Luba said, this weekend is the Birch Grove opening house from 10 to 1. If everybody wants to come, and I think there's going to be a pretty big showing from a state perspective too. I think the governor may be there, and I know today I got an email for the Crumbling Foundation Caucus and a bunch of other people.
Costa
So
will be there as well.
Costa's going to be there. It's going to be a party. Everybody come hang out.
I'll be there.
You'll be there. Everybody's gonna be there. We're all gonna be there. Everyone's gonna be there. All right, that gets us to 14, communications and petitions from council persons. Anybody have anything for me today?
Just two.
Yep.
And I think we covered one of them was if we do, when we do that joint meeting with the Board of Ed, it seems like it's better to have both topics covered in one meeting just to ensure we get everybody in that meeting. The second request was possibly considering our goals being reviewed or maybe doing a quick overview of what was accomplished and not accomplished and maybe preparing a document for the next council, kind of giving them our guidelines of what we set out 2 years ago, what we were able to do even throughout the pandemic, just so that whenever that new council, whoever it is or isn't on, kind of has an idea of what we were able to accomplish, and that gives them a good framework of what they should expect or put in terms of expectations to the interim town manager considering that situation as we're going through the search process. So I think it would just be good to kind of plan ahead for them.
That's a good idea. I think Mike, before he left, started to put together like what we had accomplished, and
I think he did provide an interim report a while back.
yeah, I think you did. So let's look at that. Let's get that updated and see. I think we did almost everything. So it'd be interesting to kind of look at that and see if there's any opportunity to finish any things up before in the next month and a half. We'll see from there. Anybody else? No? All right, that gets us to 15, public participation. That's a word that's just hard for me tonight, apparently. Public listed participation, any subject within the jurisdiction of the town council with a 3-minute limit. Please, if you're on a device, raise your hand. If you're on the phone, it's *9. There's nobody in the room, but state your name and address for the record when I call on you. And can you scroll up a little bit, please, Lisa, so I can see who was first? Sophia Johnson.
Yes, good evening again, Sophia Johnson, 48 Crystal Lake Road. I just had a quick question. If there is anything in the town code that dictates how much responsibility it is for the residents that may cover keeping the storm drain clear. I don't know if that's something that the store keeping that clear is 100% of the responsibility of the town, or if there's a certain part of that from the curb to like, you know, maybe 18 inches or whatever have you. Is there anything that exists in a code like that right now?
I,
Go ahead, Lisa.
I don't think so. I mean, we could check into that. I know there's certain requirements for sidewalks, for maintaining clearance, cleaning like snow off of them and things like that. But I don't recall ever seeing anything regarding storm drain maintenance by the citizens of the town. And certainly I wasn't, you know, trying to mandate anybody to do that. It was just to ask for help.
No, I would never, no, that wasn't what I was alluding to. It's just that, you know, civic responsibility with the town being so large and the population is mostly residents, that if there was something in the code, my query was just that if there is something, but if there isn't, I mean, if I'm directed to, you know, go to the town website and take a look for myself, that's not a problem. But anything that we can do to encourage to remove the snow or to remove anything from the storm drains, you know, just based on what you said tonight, it would seem beneficial, you know, to engage the community with that, at least that one aspect. And before engaging them, I just was wondering if there is something already on record that, you know, makes it incumbent upon a resident to be responsible for any of that. So no problem. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Just as Susan.
Hi there, Susan Salem, 180 Barstow Lane. I just want to voice my support for the town council to come up with an ordinance to ban use of cannabis in all public places, similar to what Vernon has done. And also, I really think it's a prudent decision to place a moratorium on retail sales through November of 2022, whether it's through the town council or through our zoning. I think that gives us as a town plenty of time to figure out where we want to land on this subject. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? That one's hands down. No? Good? No? Someone's up. Is someone down?
Susan.
I think that was the person who just spoke. Did you raise it? Did you?
That was
lower it?
sorry, that was a mistake.
All right, that's all right. Okay, Steve.
All right, Steve Jones, I make a motion to adjourn at 10:05 PM.
Kurt, I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Lou?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Steve? Thank you all very much. Have a good night. See you in a couple
Night.
weeks.
Thank you.